Mikael Syding is one of the most interesting fellas I've ever had the opportunity to speak with on this podcast. In 2010, his hedge fund, Futuris, won European Hedge Fund Manager of the Decade. He's an extremely popular voice in the Swedish investment community and is erudite and eclectic in his interests as they come. For me, there are lots of echoes of Nassim Taleb in Mikael's writing and his style of voice. In addition to popularising the Italian word for effortless mastery, sprezzatura, Mikael also writes regularly about markets, philosophy, psychedelics, his own personal story, science, sleep, psychology, and just about all the interesting type of stuff that the audience of A Curious Worldview is stiff and primed and ready at attention for. In this podcast, we get a little bit about Mikael's formative experiences, why Patrick Bateman was the reason he got into finance, Mikael's best shorts in his career, a full decompression on Tesla and Elon Musk. Mikael talks about his ever-changing worldview when it comes to psychedelics and consciousness, plus we hear him speak about modernity, Swedish Exceptionalism, and more. This podcast is right up there for me with episode 100 with Stephen Hicks in terms of personal highlights on this podcasting journey. And that is why I'm finishing off 2022 with this episode. This is the biggest year in the podcast short life so far. We were in the top 20% listened to on Spotify, top 5% shared, and over 100 people had A Curious Worldview as their number one most listened to podcast. This was so incredible for me to learn. I really couldn't believe it. So thank you if that's one of you. And if you're now being introduced to A Curious Worldview, be in that statistic next year in 2023. Now, fellas, it's Christmas time. So review the Santa Claus out of this podcast. Pump your good juice into the algorithm, because while this podcast took me over 5 hours to put together, it will only take you 5 seconds to review. So whether that is on Apple or Spotify or anywhere else you listen, leave fat, healthy reviews and pump your good juice into the algorithm. Okay, and with that, here is Sprezza himself, Mikael Syding. So The Retarded Hedge Fund Manager is an autobiographical book that takes us from your beginnings up north of the Polar Circle, through to and then a bit after your team winning Hedge Fund Managers of the Decade. This is a quote from the book. "This entire book is about learning from your mistakes, picking yourself up and improving, growing and excelling, not despite your errors, but thanks to them. And yet the overarching impression is one of ignored lessons in a cyclical pattern of hubris." So I wanted to ask that question to open up with you explaining via the formative years of your life.
I think the biggest thing that happened to me, the most important thing that happened to me, was when we had just left Kiruna, Jukkasjärvi, where the Ice Hotel is built, and ended up in Västerås, like a medium-sized city in the middle of Sweden. There, one summer, my elder brother died. He drowned, and he drowned before my eyes, before the entire family. My father dived in, tried to find him, but there were undercurrents that just swept him away. They actually remade the harbor after that to make sure that the big ferries did not, that they were not connected with the small sailboat harbor. Anyway, before this, I was a very happy child. I was exploring. I was curious. After that, I got more or less just locked in. I did not communicate well. I was not interested in other people. Nobody understood me, I thought, and actually, I didn't even know this until just a few years ago. So between the ages of more or less 8 and 48, I could not look people in the eye. I never looked people in the eye. I hardly had any emotions. This is not something that I knew about during this time, because I thought that I have emotions. It's just that after a certain event in 2019, it was like turning on the collar. So this event, my brother dying, and we actually also moved from we moved into a more like upscale area, and so I also got bullied. I got bullied because my parents were divorced. I got bullied because I was a sad person. Got bullied because I had trouble communicating, and I also bullied because I had like ripped clothes, because we didn't have that much money. So if I happened to ruin my clothes, I had to keep them on. So all of this turned me into like the perfect person for the finance industry. And I had no idea that I was this person. I had no idea how people viewed me. And I wasn't even interested in finance. I actually ended up there just to spite one of my old bullies.
Until 48, you couldn't look people in the eye.
Yes.
How did that affect the way you would form relationships with people?
I think that explains why I had a handful of long relationships with girls. They found me attentive and kind, but sooner or later they realized that there really is nothing there. There is nothing behind the surface. He doesn't really have real emotions. So it always ended up us just being friends. And it also explains why I'm still friends with all my exes. And whenever I have a new girlfriend, they are not at all bothered by my exes, because they see it. They know that they are just friends because we probably really never were together. And in work life, it's just very easy for me to get new colleagues or counterparties, because I used to like act like a person, and that works very well in professional life. It turns you into a very agreeable machine that just simply works. And in finance, it's a perfect thing to do. You can just click on and click off with whatever counterparty you talk to, and whatever position you take. They are just positions. It's nothing that you live and die by. I had a colleague. He was very experienced. He was an MVP, most valuable player. He got that, like, well, there are a lot of silly titles in the finance industry. Everybody wants to be like a sports star.
Yeah.
And anyway, when he moved from the sell side to the buy side, we hired him to the hedge fund. He had really had trouble sleeping, because the positions were, every single position was larger than his entire own private like economy, and he took it personally. And I was like, it's just percentages. It's like 2.2% up. You don't have to think about the billions or the millions. That's not your. It has nothing to do with you. But he really took responsibility for it, and now I see it. Now I understand. But back then it was like everything is just numbers and functionality.
It's impossible not to make a Patrick Bateman comparison. I mean, how often do you think about that? And
he is the reason I am in finance, apart from the bully. The bully put me in Stockholm School of Economics, because that was his dream. He wanted to go there, but he couldn't, because you had to have the top grades in everything. But once there, I had no idea what I was doing or what I was supposed to do with the education. But 2 years in, you were supposed to choose your master's or your whatever, your major. And a girl that we did some collaborative work together with the U.S. Embassy on IT stuff back in 1992, and I happened to read on the cultural pages in a major Swedish newspaper that there's this weird book called American Psycho. And I just saw like an angled, like a tilted cutout. You could read some of it, but not all of it. And I just saw there's something very weird and particular and gory about this. And I happened to mention it to her, and she was like, I have the book here. You can borrow it if you want to. Then I started reading it, and then I reread it, and I started reading it a third time. And then she asked, "Have you started reading it yet?" And I was like, "I'm on my third round now." And she was like, "Give it back." And anyway, I told about the book to my friends as well. And when they read it, one of them, he was like, now we know what we are supposed to do for our majors. Finance. We will do this. We will be Patrick Bateman.
What does it say about people that Patrick Bateman is a figure that they idolize so much that they want to emulate him? Is it just because he looked really good and had a high, powerful position in an organization that people deferred to him and gave him power from? Because, I mean, he's not a good guy, right?
No.
So how do you explain why so many people latched onto him as a sort of role model?
Somehow society has told us that we're supposed to work hard and play hard. We're supposed to like have super fun and be super competent and buy all this stuff. Then we are at the top of the hierarchy. That's a trap. It's a trick of society, and it's taken me like 50 years to get past it. But I can definitely see how most people, they are not in control of their lives. They are just put in school. They're put at some profession that they didn't really choose. These things just happen, and you spend 95% of your time just doing what other people expect you to do. And then you see Patrick Bateman, and it seems like he has agency on one hand, but mostly it's probably that he like epitomizes whatever the word really is, this work hard, play hard lifestyle. He's on top of everything. And yes, then he murders prostitutes at night.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And he makes it look easy. Maybe he's a bit of a sprezzatura character.
Yes, he is. And well, he was born into it because his, as they say in the movie, his father practically owns the firm, so you don't really have to work.
Yeah.
But being there, he has no troubles in the world at all. He just creates his own troubles. But otherwise, it's. I mean, how can he be a finance professional, which is supposed to be the most competitive profession in the world, and he just strolls in late, books lunch. He never does any real work.
Right. Yeah.
And it still just works. And that is what sprezzatura is. The original sprezzatura, it's actually James Bond. In the early movies, you never see him practice, but he knows Japanese, he knows politics, he knows karate, he knows wine, he can tell the like vintage and whatever. He knows exactly everything. But when did he ever study that? No. He must have studied super hard, and that is what sprezzatura is. You put in the hours and the work, but you also have to have like a basic like engine, strength, intellectual and physical, like DNA, and then you don't talk about your efforts. You just show how easy everything comes to you.
You said something quite devastating earlier, that they would eventually realize that there was nothing there by looking beyond the eyes. Is there something in there worth talking about?
Well, back then, there really wasn't anything there.
But what does that mean, I guess? What does it mean there's nothing there?
I was just more or less a placeholder. I was a function. I did what was expected of me. For example, in school, I just thought that school, what you're supposed to do in school is just show up, answer questions, do your lessons. To me, there was never a question at all whether you could not learn like whatever you was supposed to learn, like capitals or words in English. You got a task. Here it is. Do it, and I did it. That's it. Same thing when I showed up at work. I had no conception of what working really was. So I thought, now I am like a serf or a slave to this company. I have no other function in life than to do whatever work demands of me. And the same idea like permeated all aspects of my life. Like if you're a boyfriend, you're supposed to do certain things. You sort of show up, you do this, you do that. At work, just give me a task and I'll do it. But there was no real agency, no real me, nobody like making decisions.
And why do you think you were that way? You gave an explanation that was because you watched your brother pass away. And
there are several ways of talking about this, but one is that the last few years I've read up on the modern studies of the human brain, the left-right brain hemisphere divide, and there is like a pop cultural version from like decades ago that's completely wrong. Just to make sure nobody thinks I'm talking about that.
Yeah.
But the new version says that the right side of the brain, it has like more or less an one-to-one connection with reality, but that's too much for us to take. So it just hands over whatever it thinks that the left side can handle. And the left side is the one that manipulates reality. The left side can talk, and it can grasp things. It can grasp things intellectually, and it can grasp things physically. And what I think happened when I had this like triple trauma of a toxic divorce, my elder brother dying, and moving to a place where I was bullied. I think that triple trauma, it just completely shut off more or less my right side of the brain, and that's where everything with depth relies.
The reality side.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the depth of vision. It's depth of emotions, and actually the overarching you. What actually is the real conscious me. The left side, it's just, as Ian McGilchrist calls it, it's just an emissary. It just gets to do stuff. It gets orders and it does stuff. And that's exactly how I was as a person in total. I got orders and I did them. And then I was like caught in this hall of mirrors where there's no way of thinking that there is an outer side of all of this. So I couldn't see that I didn't really live a full life. So what I really think happened is that my trauma was so severe that the right brain side, it just shut off because you cannot handle this. If you are going to function, if you're at all going to survive, we will just shut off being you.
Okay, so because I am trying to figure out why a trauma might necessarily shut off one side of the brain, but then also the other side of that question is why simply reading it and bringing that knowledge to life would be enough to overcome it. There must be something more.
There is something more. I had several years ago, I stumbled upon the realm of psychedelics. So I started reading up on it. I had no idea that there was a ton of research made in the 50s and 60s. I had no idea about Aldous Huxley and Doors of Perception, or the rediscovery of magic mushrooms in Mexico in the early 60s. And when I started reading up on this, I realized that as a child of the 70s, I had gotten it completely wrong. And people were always saying like, okay, sure, you shouldn't do drugs. You shouldn't drink alcohol either, but that's okay. Nicotine, sure, it's a fun pastime. But in reality, it's alcohol and nicotine that are like the really bad guys. Like cocaine and heroin and stuff like that. They're bad and dangerous and addictive. But in popular culture, it's like, this is just fun stuff. You can play around with that. But in reality, those are the ones that can draw some people in, even worse than alcohol. And then on the like far right side with psychedelics, it's like there are stories of people jumping off buildings, going completely crazy, psychotic episodes just following them through their entire lives. And in reality, the research back in the 60s and the research that is once again surfacing shows that it's more or less the opposite, the other way around. Yeah, they can actually cure mental illness. And anyway, I was reading up on this. I read a lot of books. I read Jim Fadiman, who was one of the original researchers. He was there with the top guys at Harvard. Psychedelic Explorer's Guide. I read Stanislav Grof, who is he was not a Swiss, like Austrian researcher. He attended 3,000 LSD-assisted therapy sessions, and he like mapped out all the archetypical experiences that you can have during a psychedelic experience, and that book, after reading a lot of other stuff as well, kind of something clicked into place. I realized that I have issues. I didn't know I had them before, but reading that, I saw that I have issues that should be like exposed. I need to scratch open this wound because there is something that needs to get out. And then I made sure to actually have a really heavy psychedelic experience, and it opened up. I saw my 8-year-old self. I saw how misunderstood, how sad, how hurt. I saw that the reason I couldn't look people in the eye were because back then I was like so sad. I had to like only glance at people because I didn't know them. I didn't want them to see how hurt I was. And during this experience, I could go through situation after situation, open up to like, this person looks distorted. They look distorted because I'm looking through a lot of like tear liquid. But I could in this trip just take person after person and turn them around and look at them the way they actually look. And then I realized these were grown-ups trying to see me. They were looking at me like, we want to help him, but we can't. Well, what can we do? And I just thought they were kind of almost scary ghouls because they looked so distorted. And there is a before and after this experience. Before, I couldn't see color. I had no emotions. I didn't realize what life was about. I couldn't relate to people, really relate to people. I'm actually amazed that I have friends because I don't understand how I could have them and keep them. And after, I just understand life, it seems.
What was the trip specifically? What'd you do? The psychedelic experience, I should say.
It was a heavy dose of LSD. And that seems to be like some people talk about magic mushrooms as the better choice. But the early research focused on mescaline and LSD. And it seemed to me like there would be a cleaner and more direct source to opening up your subconscious. Magic mushrooms, the way I read up on it, seemed to be more fuzzy around the edges. Some people get like a completely new angle on life, and it seems like the trip in itself has a life and a meaning, whereas LSD is more clinic. It lays bare your subconscious, so you can deal with it, whereas you're more like high if you take magic mushrooms. I'm not completely sure about this, but the way I read about it, it seemed like LSD should be the choice for me.
And you were alone. Where were you?
I was with a friend, so it was like a safe space. You really need to be very particular about set and setting. This is what they discovered in the 60s, that it's super important that you are in the right state of mind and you're in a place where it's completely safe. Because there is a recursive element to an LSD trip where whatever goes on in your mind, and whatever goes on in your mind is affected by what goes around you, and whatever goes on in your mind can be reinforced, and that reinforces itself. So whatever happens can be much stronger, whether it's good or it's bad, or just like a deep dive into your own psyche.
I wasn't there for this, but I remember my mates telling me about a time when they were all doing lots and lots of psychedelics, and one particular evening, one of the guys doing it had a really, really bad trip, and he became compelled without any rational explanation or talking him out of it, compelled to jump out of the window.
Oh wow.
And they were on in an apartment building, so they stopped it from happening. But it was obviously an extremely scary moment of this guy fighting you off to do something completely irrational, out of character, etc. You're familiar with Tim Ferriss, I'm sure.
Yes.
What do you think about what he's doing with psychedelic research? I was like, just floored when I listened to his podcast, where he basically, throughout psychedelic research, uncovered his own trauma that he'd buried way, way, way deep down. And not knowing you very well, or Tim Ferriss very well, but I mean, I've listened to his podcast so much, so maybe I do know him a little bit. I think there is a lot in common between the two of you, potentially, just maybe in the demeanor and the.
I think he's very brave to talk so openly about it, because there is still stigma. People call it drugs, but on the other hand, a lot of we feed our teenagers with amphetamines like SSRIs. There are like 10 to 20% of the Western population are on SSRIs, and it's been proven that sure it can help some. It stops suicide sometimes, but on the other hand, it just makes people empty. When I read about the effects of SSRIs, it seems like people are becoming what I used to be. So I think it's very important work that Tim Ferriss is doing, because he was a super popular person. He seems smart, explorative, curious, and then he finds out about psychedelics and he really dives in and talks about it. That's really important. And I'm so happy that the research is taking hold these days. There is this company called maps.org. They started doing research in 1986, and it's taken all the way. It takes like 30 years before they got recognition, and now their most recent phase 3 study got a designation breakthrough from US FDA, and the European counterpart, they just tacked on. So there's a breakthrough designation here as well. And it's because they got tremendous results on people with treatment-resistant PTSD. People who, on average, had 17 years of PTSD. They tried everything, every kind of drug, therapy, whatever, and it didn't work. And I think 66% of them got symptom-free after 3 sessions. It's just amazing. You just give them a molecule over an amount of 3 months, and they get the same kind of like debriefing and therapy that they have tried for 17 years, and then they are symptom free. It's gone. They do not have PTSD anymore. And what's even more amazing is that the last third, they also get better and better over the ensuing time. They don't fall back. It doesn't get worse again. They actually get better over time without doing anything. No therapy, no molecules, which means that there is something here that you tap into the subconscious and you just restart the brain's own ability to heal. Because we have an ability to heal. And it's actually called REM sleep. When we sleep, when we are in REM mode, the brain is flooded with calming chemicals that enables you to try out a lot of emotions. Like you had a strong emotion yesterday or last week, and then you dream variants of that emotion. It doesn't copy the event. It just copies the emotion. So if you were a little bit annoyed, or if you were a little bit afraid or very happy, then you will dream that emotion in a lot of different ways. And if it was that you were scared or hurt or afraid, that can be like that's traumatic in real life. But when you're dreaming in REM state, it is not traumatic. It's just you kind of feel like you're safe, even though there are weird and scary stuff happening. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with like scary dreams, but they're not scary. They're not really scary. It's like watching a scary movie. You're not scared.
Though at the time, while you're living it, it's
yeah. But not in the dream. And when you have PTSD, it's because you had such a strong experience that the sleeping chemicals, they are not enough. But add a little bit extra, then you do get that safe state, and you can actually in a waking state talk about anything. Like people who have been assaulted or raped or been through whatever hellscape you can think about, they can actually under the influence of certain molecules, they can talk about this. And talking about it integrates it into your personality. And once it's integrated, it's just a memory. Then it's not real anymore. But before that, before you can integrate it, when it's still kind of locked away in a place in your brain, the brain can't discern what's real, a real threat, and what's just a memory. But integrating it will just become a memory. Like when you stub your toe. You've stubbed your toe like 100 times. It hurts like hell. It's almost like there's no worse pain in the world than stubbing your toe. But thinking about all the hundreds of times you've done it, it's nothing. And that's the state you can get in with for example, MDMA.
Is there any knowledge as to what's actually happening in the rewiring of the brain when you take a psychedelic trip to have such dramatic changes of mind?
One single trip of psilocybin, which is the active component of magic mushrooms, actually creates 10% more synaptic connections. One single trip. Imagine you have like 100 trillion synaptic connections in your brain. You have 100 billion neurons, and they have up to 1,000 connections each, so more or less 100 trillion. You get 10 trillion more connections overnight from one single trip. And those connections are also 10% more myelinized. They are 10% better, stronger, faster. So imagine how much your brain have actually changed physically. And those are, what they create is like a blank slate. You get to choose who you are the day after, rather than having to walk these downtrodden paths that you cannot choose anymore. So you actually get that agency that I was talking about earlier. This is it's a huge physical change. Even a 1% would be astonishing, but it's 10%.
And it's not 10% in perpetuity. I suppose there's a steep
No,
discount rate.
it wanes, because that's what the brain does. Yeah. It always prunes things that are not used. But it gives you a blank slate the day after and for a couple of weeks.
So I'm shocked to hear that until 48 you would have struggled with eye contact. Because we've met each other in the eyes so far. I mean, do you feel like a totally new person? How do you reflect on the first 48 years of your life, almost like this giant missed opportunity a little bit?
No, not at all. I was a very content person. I thought I had emotions. I thought I had agency. I'm very happy with whatever my previous self bequeathed to me, because I have a materially very comfortable life. I actually still have friends, and my family still likes me. So I did get a lot of good things. And maybe if I had been a different person, I would have chosen like a more a life that was more meaningful than doing finance. But I was happy during these years, or at least the kind of happy that I knew, and that changing doesn't take anything away from that. Actually, nothing at all. All I can see is that now I've gotten a lot of new things, and maybe even the contrast between then and now even adds to the whole experience. So I'm actually waking up happy for real every day.
Wow.
I don't use an alarm either, which I think is something people should strive for. Never use an alarm.
But doesn't that kind of fuck you here in Sweden? Because I kind of feel the same, but I notice a significant difference in the hours I sleep according to the season, which, I mean, you're super well read on all the sleep literature, but it's good to have consistent bedtime, waking up time, amount of hours you're asleep, right? And if you don't set an alarm, for instance, when it's so dark out until 11, 12, you can actually end up sleeping in more, and then you go to sleep early. Anyway, I'm just trying to say that.
I'm not sure if it actually works that way unless you're underslept.
Maybe that's it.
And I think that the alarm and drinking too much coffee and maybe partying, these things, like, they add up. So for me, I mean, I have an Aura ring. It tracks my sleep. So I know that I sleep about 6.5 hours in summertime and 7.5 in wintertime, and at least like measuring the absolute midwinter and midsummer. So there is a change, but when I cannot sleep more than 8 hours unless I'm ruined in some way.
Right. Okay. We've been going for a while. Forgive me if this is too much belaboring the point, but it's quite interesting. You wrote in the notes to me that when your brother drowned and you experienced the divorce of your parents, it killed your empathy. And I know we've kind of been speaking around this a little bit, but I would assume those experiences would almost endear the opposite, appreciation and empathy. But anyway, obviously it didn't work out that way. But what do you make of that?
I am my own blind spot. It's very difficult to objectively analyze yourself. But I think that if I had kept my empathy, maybe I would have had like empathy with myself, and that would have been too much to bear. Something like that. It's hard to say. I mean, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know how the brain really works, but I think that...
but does anyone?
No. Maybe I am Mikael Christ. But anyway, I think the system of shutting down in order to preserve just yourself, to be able to live at all, it's a crude process. It just the brain just shuts down whatever it thinks is needed, and a lot of other stuff gets shut down with it. I mean, it could probably just have as easily have ended up the opposite way.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking potentially.
But what actually happened after 2019 is that, for starters, I cried every day for a year. Every day. And I hadn't cried like more or less for 40 years, maybe 5 times. In the beginning, it was awful. It was so painful. And I was crying over my old girlfriend. I was crying over my dog. I cried when I saw families in the park.
I just became a big softie.
yeah, and I actually stopped going to the gym. I'd been going to the gym since I was 13, so like for 35 years. I stopped going to the gym because I couldn't bear doing squats or bench presses crying. So I started going to an outdoor gym instead, because there I could be more or less alone. So I went from being like empathy-less to just complete softie.
Swimming in it.
Yeah. And after about a year, I started liking it. I still cry a lot. Maybe not every day, but it's close.
Yeah. How about your brother and sister, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about your siblings, your brother and sister? Because they both also went to Västerås, had to experience the trauma of what happened to your elder brother, the divorce. How have their paths tracked alongside yours?
They seem to have been less affected than I was. I've talked to them about it. It took me about a year after the experience to realize that there are other people affected here. And so I first reached out to my brother and like really apologized to him, because I mean, I was the older brother and he lost 2 older brothers that day. When I realized that was like a punch in the gut, and I had to talk to him, apologize, and we reconnected in a very good way. But he seemed to have like gone through. I don't know. Maybe his empathy area in the brain, maybe it got affected the way mine did. So he kind of dealt with it for real. I mean, he had his issues in his teens, but I think that was very healthy. So he dealt with it. My older sister, I'm not really sure. I mean, she's a medical doctor. She's very well accomplished. She is empathetic. She has 4 daughters. They have a super fantastic family, and I'm also always amazed when I get there, because they welcome me in a way that I'm like, why? I'm not even a good person. Why are you so kind to me? Why are you happy that I come here? And then like they're 18, 15, and 10, and they should be bothered that somebody is coming there and like disturbing their peace. But they are like, oh, here he is, and I don't even know what I am. I'm like the mother's brother. I don't even know what that's called.
Yeah, your uncle.
I'm an uncle. Yeah, I usually call
Uncle Sprez.
Yeah, I thought I once said that I'm their aunt.
Okay.
because I can't really I can't relate the there was something with sister and
Maybe we go back to the timeline.
Yeah.
So you said something interesting earlier, that the only reason you went to this fancy degree at Stockholm University was because your bully wanted to do that.
Yeah.
There's a bit of memetics there, isn't there? Do you reflect on that at all as being, wow, what a weird motivation to do something?
Yeah, but I really didn't have any agency, any strong wills or emotions. You can actually do a parallel here back to Patrick Bateman when he has his face gel on, and he says, "You can grip my hand, feel my flesh gripping yours. You can gaze into my eyes and feel there's maybe some comparative lifestyles, but I simply am not there."
Wow,
something like that. And this was at least something. He said, "I want to go to Stockholm School of Economics. Mike, you should go." And I was like, what is that even? I was thinking about like maybe getting some chemics degree, maybe become a teacher. I had no idea. I didn't want to leave Västerås. I was like confined to this place. This is what I am. I cannot explore things. I'm just like, this is me. This atom is me. And when he said, "I want to go to SSE, you should go to SSE," I was like, well, somebody said something, and if I go, then at least he will be a little bit bothered.
Good enough motivation. Do you think there are a lot of people out there like that caricature of Patrick Bateman you just described? You can feel my hand, you can look into my eyes, but I'm simply not there. Do you think walking around the streets what percentage of people are just captured by this malaise?
I think most. I would say like,
isn't that
80,
really
90%.
Sad and concerning.
Yeah, and what I think the original sin was the Renaissance. The Renaissance created the modern world. Modernity is what's wrong. We don't live in nature anymore. We have these right lines and angles, and everything is artificial. We have more or less ruled out fractals from our life, and the mind wants to see fractals. It wants to see nature.
What's a fractal?
Fractal is it's a mathematical concept where originally I think it was a guy called Mandelbrot, and it's when you take a single geometrical concept like a triangle, and imagine you put little triangles on each side of the triangle, and then you put little triangles on each side of those triangles. If you keep going, these will turn into super intricate, interesting formations that you could never even imagine would originate from just like a triangle. And that's how nature looks. Look at a tree. You have a branch, or you have the trunk. Then you have a few branches, and the branches, they have their branches, and they have their branches, and it just keeps going. It's a really simple process. It's slightly affected by the sun and the wind and whatever shade there is or whatever trees are around, but it's a super simple process of reminiscing of the triangle fractals, and these processes creates humans, trees, nature, and that's where we are supposed to live. This is what we are supposed to experience, but instead we live in these artificial cities with just like skyscrapers and straight angles, which do not.
So why do you live here then, in this beautiful apartment in the middle of the city?
I bought it to be close to work, but I bought it before the event.
Okay.
So
maybe you're rethinking it.
yeah, and there is a pretty high probability that I will move out to some place outside the city center and see trees every day. Well, actually, I do see trees every day. I mean, I go to my outdoor gym every morning, and it's situated in a park, Humlegården in Stockholm. So I do see the sun and trees every morning.
Nice. But I interrupted you. You were talking about how it all started in the Renaissance.
Oh, yeah. So that's when we started understanding about nature, that there are laws, and there are laws we can exploit. So what's happening here? It's the emissary. It's the left hemisphere taking control and saying, "Look, here's something I can manipulate. I can use this. I can like dictate whatever happens in reality rather than just experiencing it." And I think we were put here to experience the physicality and the 3D space. We're not. Well, we can get to that later on maybe, but we are not 3D space-time beings. We created 3D space-time for a reason, just to try stuff out, because matter and 3D space it creates kind of a resistance that's interesting for us to like butt heads against.
Yeah.
It's the resistance is what's interesting. We are originally unresistant beings. Anyway, so the left brain hemisphere, it realized there are laws here that I can exploit. And so from the Renaissance and on, we have created more and more wealth. We have exploited the natural laws in order to build stuff, machines and buildings. And we have moved away from chasing after food and partners, and instead we created this work hard, play hard lifestyle, which is completely like distant from the way we were made, whether it was the consciousness, or if you have more of a Darwinistic idea of life, that we are biological creatures. But in just like 100 years, or at least 500 years, we just grew completely apart from nature. And I think that means that now we are trapped in our left brain hemisphere. We think...
But we still have a right brain.
Yeah, we do.
So how can we be trapped in one of them?
Well, there is a way out. You just have to think about it and embrace it. But the problem is that we live in a culture. We live in this environment where we grow up. We start out curious, happy, interested, and then we are put in school and told to know our place, to think before we speak, to raise your hand. Like there are all these rules. You're not supposed to make a mess. Things are supposed to be like clean and straight and controlled. And there's this whole control thing that is the left brain hemisphere, which keeps us from actually experiencing real life. And so the Renaissance created the opportunity to not having to work every day for your sustenance. And it's exactly that distant. It made us distant from reality. I don't really know how to explain it, but
yeah, because it almost sounds like you're romanticizing the good old days when it was a constant struggle to almost do everything, and therefore any reward would only come at the other end of a significant struggle, which makes which is a romantic idea to project onto.
Well, I don't want to struggle. And I don't think people need to struggle either. I think there is a way to live in this abundance of wealth and still be a natural being. But I also think that growing up in this artificial environment makes it difficult to break out of it and to actually be a conscious and natural being.
Right.
As I definitely do not romanticize about dying of appendicitis when you're 22.
No.
Like,
or you being this, brilliant financial mind, not having any means of being able to take advantage of that, because you live in Kiruna in the 1580s. It's like, okay, what do we do today?
I hope nobody lived there in the 1580s.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
I don't know either, but somebody lived there. The Sames or whatever they call
the Sami. Yeah. But it kind of ties in briefly to what you were saying earlier about SSRIs, like antidepressants. Sort of the idea of that chemical escape being a reaction to, darkness and downs and depression of sorts. But, and this ties into something I want to bring up with you with Nassim Taleb and his work, but in Anti-Fragile, he says specifically about antidepressants, like there is the threshold to disorder. If you are threatening to take your life or likely to take your life because you are so chemically depressed or otherwise depressed, then perhaps the intervention of a chemical substance that is going to level you out would be necessary to therefore make you available for therapy to maybe bring you back to some sort of equilibrium. But unless you are threatening that suicide, you're threatening pain, you should rather let the natural mechanisms of the body make you a stronger person, to be able to know that you can go really far down and still be strong enough to come out of it on the other side. And also from such depth, it also gives you a much brighter appreciation of how good things can be as well.
Yes, I think you should only do those kinds of interventions, including psychedelic interventions, only when necessary. It's once again, we're here to experience all the emotions of life, all the emotions of physicality and 3D space. And whenever you take any kind of molecules to alter that, it should only be to create a new perspective to actual reality. It's both kind of cheating and a little bit of dangerous to go the route of trying to live in an altered state of consciousness. They are there for perspective, I think. And SSRIs, the dangerous thing with them is that they you kind of need to keep taking them the way I understand it. Because when you get off them, it's like, oh no, this like reality keeps coming back to you, and it's not. It wasn't cured in any way.
More fragile to deal with that reality because for so long you've been chemically leveled down.
Yeah. And that's why the intervention with the psychedelics is so different, because it actually creates something tangible and good and useful in your brain that you can actually start over, whereas SSRIs, they make it even worse to start over.
Yeah, I think about antidepressants, SSRIs, analogous to if you had a broken arm. So if you were to just bang, completely severed bone, and the way you treated that was with anesthetic, you can walk around and be like, everything's fine, I don't feel any pain, sure, it's a bit hard to pick things up, but everything's fine. And then you come off those... You come off the anesthetic and your arm is almost damaged so badly that to come back to where it was beforehand is almost unthinkable. It's like a permanent shift downwards to the left. That arm is never going to be the same as it once was. As an analogy to what SSRIs might be doing to one's brain or one's ability to cope and to live in a world that is unfair. that you might not be always dealt the best hand, but you got to be able to meet the downside in the eyes and try and get out there.
But it's so typical of modern society to just plaster over things with stuff like SSRIs. It's like, this person is not functioning correctly right now, so here's something just to take the edge of it right now, and then we'll deal with the problems later. So you just kick the can down the road, and you keep doing that. We end up in 2022 where 20% of people are on SSRIs, and they just sleepwalking through life. And that's not even the worst of it, because like 90% of everybody is really sleepwalking through life in the exact same way. They dream about retiring, and when they retire, they die pretty quickly because they realize that they have no purpose. They had no purpose when they were working, but at least somebody told them what they were supposed to do. Like, go to work, get an income, care for your children, and then at least you're worth something. You have some kind of purpose, but it's not intrinsic.
It's not deep.
Yeah, you don't feel it yourself. You're just told what to do. Yeah. And that's the reason I get so fired up about these things, is that I was that, but in spades. I was, just because of my affliction, I had it worse than anybody else. But at least I had it. I had such a strong case of it that I didn't even feel it. But I think that most people, they can actually feel that they are meaningless, useless, without purpose. And they don't really know what to do about it, but they dream about retirement, because then they know something will change. And maybe they can use the free time to explore what it is to be them. But once they get there, they realize that they have absolutely nothing.
Do you think you would have been as functional and as effective with Futuris if you weren't?
No, absolutely not. It was such an unexpected and very useful gift to be without empathy. It's perfect. It's the Patrick Bateman side of it.
Because it just means you can unemotionally make massive financial decisions.
Yeah. And if you do something wrong, it's just numbers. Sure, you do feel the responsibility to clients and your colleagues, but those are also just like functional inputs. You don't want to. It's not that you don't want to disappoint them. You don't want to hurt them, and that's more effective.
Right. How's your thinking about risk changed since this 2019 dramatic change of worldview? Because presumably the Syding, who is running Futuris and can rationally just make sense of the percentage loss, percentage gain, the money involved, unemotionally attached to it, would have a different framework for risk than the one sitting in front of me now.
Yeah, probably. Once again, it's hard to analyze yourself, but I do think I take less risk now. And in Futuris, the mandate was we could be long or short or long short. We could be balanced or leverage long or very heavily net short. Now at Antiloop hedge fund, where I work now, my mandate is to be market neutral. So I always have to balance the long side and the short side with like 5 to 10% discretionary position, but in total I'm supposed to be market neutral, and that means that my management style now, my portfolio management style, it's naturally much less risky. On the other hand, that means that I can take as much risk as I want in single positions, and I do. So I would, in a paradoxical way, some of my positions, when I was short AMC, for example, one of these meme stocks.
Is this now with Antiloop?
Yes. Yep. So I started working at Antiloop in February 2022, you could say. That's when we got our special fund permit from the Swedish FSA. So I've been working more or less a year. We did have a soft start before, but more or less since February this year. Anyway, I was short AMC, which is one of the original meme stocks. I was short when it actually rallied 100% in just a few days. And I kept the short.
Oh my God.
And I made a profit on it. That's kind of risk tolerance, but because it was just one of 42 positions.
You're right. But still.
And I would never have done that.
How big is the frog in your throat when you see a rally on a short position?
Yeah, well, not too much for me personally, but when I talk to my colleagues, and then they are like, so what do you make of this, Michael? Are you thinking about covering it? I mean, what if it doubles again? So it's actually just the discussion with my colleagues that makes it into a situation. Because me personally, I think I have the situation under control. I think I know what's going on. Sure, this kind of short covering, when it can go like 1,000% rather than 100. We were short in Futuris. We were short Volkswagen when it rallied 1,000%.
Oh my God.
But we survived it,
Yeah.
and we made money.
Yeah.
So I think I have that tucked away in my DNA. I know that you can ride these things out unless your position is sized wrongly. And my position in AMC, it was sized correctly.
Yeah, right. I've realized now we're about an hour in. It's likely not going to follow any sort of timeline. It's just going to be random jumping around. That's okay with you, right?
Yeah, sure.
Is Nassim Taleb a guy you're familiar with?
Yes. I've read The Black Swan. I've browsed through some of his other stuff, but and they didn't really resonate with me. I thought The Black Swan was his like magnus opus. That was really, really good.
Yeah.
The rest is kind of rehashed, or maybe his editor is like saying, write something.
That's probably true. He's actually been a really, really influential guy on my thinking. I think particularly maybe if you gave Fooled by Randomness another chance, because it is this lovely sort of philosophy about how to live one's life, how to think about randomness and uncertainty, less so than say what Black Swan is, which is, kind of like a playbook for market participants. But yeah, I mean, because I do have questions about Taleb in here as well, so I'm just not sure whether you want to answer them or whether
Sure.
So I wanted to ask you about the philosophy of Antiloop, because it's quite an intriguing name, if you want to talk about that.
Yes. A few years ago, like 5 years ago, I had a podcast. My girlfriend was about to start a new podcast, but her two partners, they just dropped off the same day they were supposed to launch. So she just...
Jesus, that's unreliable.
Yeah, so she just said like, we already have sponsors lined up and everything, and we're supposed to make this episode. Could you like just fill in and be my partner? So we started this podcast called Outsiders. And I think Antiloop is exactly what Outsiders is. It's a completely new way of looking at investments, macroeconomy, old like tropes and cliches and rules about the market. People just keep like repeating these like old truths, but they have no real mass on it themselves. People say like you're supposed to just buy and hold, but how do you know what to buy and hold? Well, you buy the average and hold it. Okay, so what's your input? You're not doing anything. So why are you trading different stocks? Why don't you just buy the index and just be done with it? You don't have to spend any time on it. No, but I think it's fun, and I want to buy good companies. So you're saying you're actually using your brain. So why don't you use your brain for more than just buy and hold? How do you know that you chose the best companies one time and then you're supposed to hold from there. It just doesn't make any sense. So things like this, it just permeates the entire industry, and especially retail investors. So Antiloop and Outsiders was a reaction to that. And here in this very kitchen, Anna once said, but Mike, why do you keep holding on to your short positions in the market? You just keep losing money. Why do you do it? And that discussion, it ended up with actually her managing my money and her crafting an asset allocation strategy, which changes weights between gold, agricultural products, and stocks, because they have counter-cyclical properties. And after crafting this strategy and doing some statistical work together with another friend, we decided to talk to some of my old colleagues. Martin Sandqvist, who founded Lynx Asset Management, which grew into one of the largest CTA fund strategies in the world, actually. So they had like, I think, $5-6 billion or something like that. And when he listened to the strategy, he thought like, no, this is really something. Low frequency trading, that's an unused like area in the business, because everybody's doing high frequency, or you're supposed to like do a lot of research. And it was like, you do the long cycles and you just position between gold and agricultural and stocks. So that was the origin of Antiloop, just being not do what everybody else is doing. Don't short the stock market because it's expensive. Do something else instead. Shorting is dangerous because trends can always just keep continuing, or central banks can print money. Things just go the opposite of what you think they will do. But there's always some other place, some other market, which will perform better than the stock market. So when everybody was screaming, Tina, there is no alternative, Anna was saying, no, there is an alternative. There is agricultural products and there is gold. So Antiloop is about not being in the loop, doing whatever
Nice.
we like to do, and which is different from what everybody else is doing.
I just was wondering if there was like any of the Hofstadter strange loops inspiration from it or anything. But
the funny thing here is that I really love Hofstadter. I read Gödel, Escher, Bach 25 years ago. I thought it was amazing. I took my sweet time reading it. I think it took more than 7.
It's a brick, yeah.
Yeah, more than 7 months, I think, in reading it, almost a year. And I really pushed through. Have you read it?
I'm reading it at the moment upon a strong recommendation from a very, very sort of savant mathematical genius friend who said it changed his worldview more than anything else. I was like, okay then. So I bought it assuming it would be this pamphlet or something.
Yeah.
So I'm going through the dialogues at the moment.
There is a chapter where he actually proves Gödel's theorem. And I think it took me a couple of months to get through that chapter. But I kind of sensed you are supposed to do this. I think it says in the book, you can skip this chapter. You don't really need to know this. But actually going through the proof and completely realizing that even mathematics is not a closed system. There are things in there that are out of control. There are true statements that cannot be stated, or there are false statements that cannot be proved, something like that. I don't really remember. But you actually go through the symbols, you learn a new system of symbols, and you do the mathematics. And once you get through the chapter, you truly see the reality of Gödel's theorem. So that was a really formative book for me in itself, but also regarding that there are important stuff to learn from books. But I haven't read I Am a Strange Loop. I have it on my list, and I really want to read it. But I need to find the right time to do it.
Maybe it's worthwhile mentioning like we said earlier, this is now just jumping around a lot, but that's okay, right? The paradoxes in this recent Cloak and Daggers trip you took to Switzerland. You mentioned a couple of very interesting paradoxes.
Yeah, the coincidence of opposites.
Yeah.
So it's a concept that I slowly realized over several years. Over and over again, I realized that there are a lot of important questions where the answer is another question. It's how long is a piece of string? And the answer is it depends. I first thought that this is just some kind of fun coincidence, and over the years I saw this over and over again. It was like you always get the question, how do you know how much of something to do, and how do you know if this is good or bad? And it turns out that everything lies on a spectrum. It's like the superposition of the Schrödinger equation. Things are coexistent, and they only coalesce into a specific when you really ask the question. But the question you ask determines your answer. So that's a coincidence of opposites in itself. There is a broad spectrum of things that could turn out, but it's your question that creates it. So going to Switzerland on this very weird journey, I was just asked to give a speech on something that I was knowledgeable about and that I cared about. And I just said, like, maybe coincidence of opposites. And he was like, somebody I don't know, I had never heard about, never talked to, didn't get a picture of, didn't even get his full name, or not a name at all. I just got an eponym and a pseudonym. And he, so I just went to Switzerland preparing a speech for a group. I had no idea who they were. And I just said, well, maybe coincidence of opposites. And he was like, he researched it a bit, and he was like, oh my God, this is... Alan Watts speaks about this a lot, and he loves Alan Watts, but he still hadn't stumbled upon the coincidence of opposites. So what it is that, for example, music. You might, what is music? If I ask you what is music, you might say, it's notes, it's a melody, it's a bass. It's not the bass, it's not the notes, it's actually the spaces in between. That's what creates a pace and a rhythm. But of course you need both the notes and the bass and the spacing. So you need all of it. And actually the melody, when it flows like, the melody is supposed to float, and the bass actually interrupts the flow. But interrupting the flow actually creates, it actually emphasizes the melody. So in one way, it completely interrupts the melody. It's like boom, boom, boom. You ruin the melody. But ruining the melody and the contrast creates the melody. It makes it even more interesting and strong, because you keep the melody in your head, anticipating the bass, and that is what actually makes the melody go. And the melody in itself, it's not the notes, it's the spaces. So what are you really listening to? Yeah, the spaces is what the composer made. He made the spaces. The notes were all there. They're just like 12 notes. But he makes the spaces. So that's one coincidence of opposites.
One? Yeah. What's another one?
Well, one that actually forms the basis of my entire world view and my motto and my way of living. One. Yeah, it's a just one more. I'm actually writing a book now that will be called Just One, nice, and nice. Parenthesis more. and it has to do with being process-oriented or goal-oriented. So if you want to accomplish something, they say that you should have like a really tangible and lofty goal. This is what you're going for. I will win the Olympics, or I will be the richest person on earth, something like that. So you have a goal. Then you can work for that goal every day, every hour. You see it. It burns like a fire. Like you're going for it. It's being goal oriented. But if you get to the goal, then you're done. You reached your goal. So what do you do then? Well, you have to form another goal, but reaching the goal just makes you feel empty and like, so now what? And reaching the goal, nothing really happens. There is no catharsis. There is no. Oh, that's Patrick Bateman again. When you're done. Then you're useless. So reaching the goal is the worst thing you can do, except for one thing: not reaching it, because then it was all for nothing. You didn't even reach the goal. You never felt any joy, because the joy it was postponed till you reached the goal. And if you don't reach it, you were empty all the way along, and then you were a failure that didn't reach the goal. So everything was useless. But if you instead have like a process, you wake up every day, or every hour or minute, you have an idea of who you want to be in the moment. Not who you want to be then, not a goal, but like right now, right here and now, I am a person who works out every day in the outdoor gym. It makes me happy to think that I am that person. I'm happy walking to the outdoor gym. I'm happy in the outdoor gym because I'm being me. I'm being the person I'm supposed to be, and I'm being it all the time. That gives me joy and a purpose, and I feel good in the moment. And I also, and this is actually the really important stuff, is that if I have a process that I'm happy with, then I will do it every day. There will never be an end point. I will never reach a goal and be finished. So focusing on the here and now and just doing a process, that gets me to any kind of goal and beyond. So just one, which seems like you just cut something into, you cut something up into just a little piece, that actually gets you beyond whatever lofty goal you might have had. This is like the ultimate coincidence of opposites.
To add to that, in the notes that you wrote on Just One More, which is Pu Wei Wei, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said two things there. Pu means uncarved, unworked, unfinished, like a raw piece of wood. You just like you find a piece of wood in the forest. It's unworked, but that's the most beautiful and raw potential there is. It contains everything. It's like a piece
limitless potential.
Yeah. So it's the most beautiful thing there is. And Da Vinci might come by and make a statue of it. The statue is in there, if you want it to be in there. But there is much more than just that one single statue. There are all the statues that could ever be made. So that's Pu. And then you have Wu Wei, which is kind of related. Wu Wei just means unforced action. It's it can convey a feeling of laziness, maybe, because it's about keeping with the natural flow of nature. So, like if you're swimming downstream, it's much nicer and easier than swimming upstream. Some people would think that no, swim upstream. That's the thing. Then you're really doing something, like walk up a mountain, swim upstream. But if you swim downstream, everything is effortless.
This idea of harmony.
You get farther. It's harmony with nature. You have a little bit of agency. You can swim left and right, but you get so much farther, and you're getting where you're supposed to get.
So is the book trying to explain that philosophy for an individual to understand how they can swim downstream, or how they can figure out what they are supposed to get? Because these are like giant, almost unanswerable questions in one way.
Yes, I try to instill into the reader the idea of you don't really have to work that hard. You already are you, and just keep being you. Go with the path of least resistance of being you, but not the path of least resistance of just being part of society and working hard and playing hard. But it's a fine line to choose between those two, of course.
It's the finest of lines. Because as soon as someone decides to not participate fully in society, they all of a sudden become much more difficult to find, to employ. You, especially here in Sweden, where there is a very, very regimented mold for a cultural fit. Not even going to introduce the whole problem of Swedish workforces maybe not hiring, say, people who are immigrants because they don't fit the cultural fit. If one is to live outside of society, not join the work hard, play hard mentality, not be content with taking lunch at 12 with everybody because that's what you do. This is a part of the culture. How does that same person then go on and find income, find a partner, find a community? All these like necessarily important things.
Yeah, you have to actually adapt to whatever environment you have. It's like you cannot be Captain Fantastic. Are you? Do you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Viggo Mortensen.
Is it Viggo?
I'm pretty sure it's Viggo. This is the movie.
I thought it was Woody Harrelson. But
this is the movie where they're in the bus in Oregon.
They're like these two kids and the father, and they live in the forest. And like when the son turns like 9, he has to hunt down his own deer.
There may be a remake of it then, because this movie came out a few years ago.
Yeah, this is like 5 years old.
Yeah, and there was like 10 kids.
Okay, no, it's not the same. Okay, maybe.
But anyway, go on.
It's more or less impossible in this day and age to just live off of nature and be completely independent of society. So you have to be here. Maybe you have to work at a bank. That doesn't have to kill you,
right?
As a person, you just have to go there and like be a good employee without
understand that this is the cost of the other things you want in your life.
Yes, yeah. There are costs. But there, as we talked earlier about, you don't want to have appendicitis when you're 22, and even if you live in a castle in the 1500s, you would still like die from a cold before age of 30. That's not good. But that's the cost of living then and there. And the cost of living here and now is you have to have like a work. You do difficult stuff that you don't want to do. Of course, it's part of being alive and an adult. We don't like gravity. Gravity is like it's a hassle, but still, it's something we have to deal with. And having a bank job is like having gravity. And kind of lost track there.
Trying to get to what with the book that you're writing right now, what the purpose of it is. How does one balance between the competing forces of trying to fulfill their ambition, to realize their potential, but at the same time not necessarily jiving with society?
So society tells you to like be successful, I think. You're supposed to be this like you're in control and you have a nice house and a beautiful partner and a great job that when people ask you what you do, you tell them what you work with, and it's supposed to be like the best work you can get. Like anybody who gets a less expensive car or a less good job than they could get, then it's like it's a weird signal, or it's a signal that no, that's actually the best you could get. So what I'm trying to convey is this idea of stop thinking about goals and endpoints or anybody judging you. You are the only one judging you, and the judging is made in the present, in the moment. Every moment counts. Unless somebody is right now sawing off your knee, there is nothing wrong with right now. If you pull it close enough, you're not even hungry when you're hungry. That's a little bit of a stretch, but like in the absolute moment, you don't have to eat right now. And I think this is a mental tool that marathon runners use. Some of them at least, they say they aim for the next 10 meters. They just run 10 meters more all the time.
And then, that's just recycling in their head.
Yeah, I'm going for that tree or that whatever crossing, something they see. They just go for short stretches all the time, and it just keeps going. And that's exactly how my workouts look. There have been times when I've gone to the gym right straight from a party without even sleeping. It's been times that I've been extremely hungover, or just like, I don't want to train. But okay, just let's put on the shoes and maybe go there. Maybe just go to the sauna. Maybe, well, I'll go into the gym area, and maybe I can lift something. And then it turns out into one of my best sessions ever, because I just do one. Because doing one,
just one more,
just one is so easy. And then right when you think, okay, I've done one, and I get to go home. Then just before the weight hits the floor, I'm like, just one more.
Nice, I love that. Cool. I'm keen to see how that comes out. Let's transition to maybe some more of the not finance-related questions, but related to your career at Futuris, then also as well. I mean, because there's a lot there. And I first discovered you and Ludwig through Future Skills. This was back in, it must have been 2018 or 19 that I was listening to it, and I discovered through their Eric Townsend, I discovered through their Pippa Malmgren, who have gone on to be some of my favorite podcast guests and podcasts with macro voices. So, there is a lot there, the topics that you covered there as well, that I think we probably have the biggest sort of mutual interest in. But you mentioned before agricultural products, gold, stocks, agricultural products, just an example of what that is.
So wheat, corn, coffee, cocoa.
Okay.
Sugar.
Nice. What do you think about the famous short sellers? It sounds like you've held a few big short positions, but say Bill Ackman, Jim Chanos. How do you think about them, and how do you think about activist short selling?
Well, I think Jim Chanos is absolutely brilliant. He and Druckenmiller, those are my absolute favorites. Sure, people talk about Soros, but I don't really have a feel for exactly what he's doing. I mean, sure, he had his way with the British pound in 1992. I think that was,
and the Swedish krona, right?
Yeah. So that's interesting, and those are interesting risks to take. But I think that was a different time, and I think he knows that as well. But Druckenmiller, well, they still keep at it, and they keep getting better at it. I'm not really sure about Ackman. He must be brilliant in some way, but he's made so many wrong calls lately. So I'm sure it's just bad luck. He's still he's still there. He's a billionaire, and he's running billions. Yeah, and what's he called? John something. John Paulson.
Okay.
It was one of the big short sellers in the Big Short in the housing market in 2008. He made several billions.
Yeah, right.
So I admire short sellers. They do tremendous work for the society. They uncover wrongdoings, fraud, bad people generally. it has nothing to do with ruining good companies. Never. And people running good companies, they know this. There is actually, there is a lot of positive to be had if you have a company and people are selling it short, because that means you have a latent pool of forced buyers. That as soon as you prove that your company is doing good, they will have to buy. So there might be like a 10, 20, 30% of the entire outstanding capital that needs to be bought. Not only that, when they sold, they had a negative effect on the share price, which is very, very good, because that meant that more people got to buy the stock cheaply. So rather than there could just be 100% owners, there could be 130% owners and at cheaper prices. So it's like there is no better gift to your company than short sellers.
I'm sure that's an opinion that it would be tough to hold when someone was shorting against you.
No, because unless you are a forced seller in that very moment, then there is absolutely nothing hurting you. You can buy more. If you are convinced that this is cheap, then it is a gift to you, even if you're holding a ton of shares.
Was your short against Volkswagen your greatest short of all time?
No. Let's see. There were a couple of tech companies back in between 2000 and 2002 that I had really good shorts on. Red Hat, for example. But none of the shorts I made in the early 2000s were like spectacular. It was more like guerrilla shorting, like 10 different companies. 10 different companies. I shorted in between, depending on the rhythm of the reporting and whatever I thought was expected, I kept shorting, covering. So I never really took like one big bet and just held on to it. So that was typically institutional risk management style shorting. But overall, between 2000 and 2003, 4 maybe even, shorting was the way I made my money. But I think that my absolute best shorts I've actually done this year.
Okay.
So I've shorted Shopify, I've shorted Tesla, actually spectacularly well in Tesla, depending on, considering what kind of company it is. And they have a huge following, a huge fan base. And
fanatical.
And Elon Musk is a master public relationist. He just controls the narrative. But still, I've been lucky to short it at the exactly right moments, and actually also I have this idea of when it feels perfect, like my short is doing so well. Now I have the news flow with me, then I cover.
That's time to leave.
Yeah. And every time it feels so wrong, but I just know I have to do it.
Yeah. And then do you then do the work in hindsight to realize whether it was the right decision or not?
No, because there isn't any information. I mean, I try to do the work, but I realize that it's just a feeling. I still want to be short, and I kind of know that it's the right thing to be over the coming year or two.
With Tesla specifically.
Yeah, with Tesla specifically. Yeah. But other names as well. I still want to carve out some extra performance by timing, because I think that this is the most intellectual competitive environment there is, I think, and you're supposed to use your intellect, but people think that you're not supposed to. You have an idea, like be short this name and just be short until it's over. But I don't think so. You're supposed to be alert and attentive and actually use your brain.
You think being short specifically is the most intellectual competitive environment? Or finance?
Well, I actually hadn't thought about it that way, but yes. I always think about finance in general, but shorting is even worse. there are not more short sellers, and short sellers are not your competition, but there is a general drift in the markets. It's a drift upwards, where you have the authorities against you, you have other buyers against you, you have money printing against you, you have growth against you, like the growth of people, productivity, the economy. So everything is against you. Everything is stacked against you. And the only thing you have is, do you know this? Do you know it better than everybody else? Do you understand that this is fraud or it is expensive? Somebody will have to pay.
Do you have any shorts right now?
Yes, I do. I'm short Tesla. I covered a few days ago. Well, the specifics aren't interesting. And then it rallied. And then I increased my short just the other day. And that increase is in the money.
Okay.
So I'm very happy about that. I'm short Shopify.
Interesting. Oh, sorry. Go on.
Yeah, sure.
No, go on. Is it just Shopify and Tesla?
No, I have like 10 shorts. It's hard pressed to actually recall all the shorts right now. I'm short Cintas. Okay. It's a company renting or selling uniforms. So I'm betting on the job market becoming more difficult, and that they will not have to replace or sell or rent more uniforms than usual. Mm-hmm. So if we have a recession, then Cintas, which is a very expensive company, then they should fall.
Is that the same thesis for Shopify? If we go into a recession, e-commerce and over hyperconsumption is going to go down?
Actually, it's mostly that they are extremely expensive. Okay. And I think that's...
Even still, after their like 90% haircut?
Yeah, it's like 10, 15 times sales. I don't know if that means anything to you, but like this is my philosophy of valuation. You have profits. And if something that is similar to the economy is worth about 15 times earnings, so 15 years of earnings, then that's average. That's okay. That's good. If you bought the general index, the entire stock market, at about 15 times earnings, anytime during the last 100 years, you would get about 10% compound annual total returns. That's pretty good. It's not spectacular, but over time it adds up. That's 15 times earnings. So a normal company should be valued at 15 times earnings. So if you are valued at 1.5 times sales and have 10% margin, that's the exact same thing.
Okay.
Because then it just translates.
Yeah. And they were 15x sales.
Yeah. So either they would have to grow to 10 times their current size, or they would have to have much higher margins than 10%. Over time, almost no company can sustain more than 10% margins. And that's the average for the economy. And the competition ensures that you will either be replaced or your margins will competitive away. So Shopify needs to be 10 times larger than they already are, but they already are super successful.
Yeah. No, totally. Okay, interesting. More on Elon Musk. I've seen some tweets from you and stuff. I get the sense that you, like you just admitted to, you admire his ability for public relations, but you generally consider him to be a bit of a con man.
Yes. It's hard to tell, and I'm impressed by him, and we do have a bit of parallel lives, so maybe it's just jealousy. I mean, we both programmed like computer games when we were like 10 years old and made money off of it. I mean, I sold computer games that I had programmed when I was 10. He did something similar. And then he became the richest man on earth, and he created like 5 incredible companies, and he's sending his own roadsters around Mars. So I mean, it's
cool.
He's a super cool guy.
Yeah.
However did he make this? Anyway, when I go through Tesla and all the stories around Tesla and Tesla's employees and their security personnel, there's so many stories of him being just a complete ass. He's like, he's evil, and he's not even an evil genius. He's he's kind of smart, but not that smart. And he's a person trying to sound smart by using fancy words and changing his own dialect. That's not. I mean, he doesn't talk that way. The way he talks publicly, he doesn't speak that way privately.
Really?
There aren't any real recordings except for very old ones where you can tell that, well, these are different people. He's a complete psychopath in that way. He just changed his whole way of his rhythm, his cadence, his intonation, his vocabulary, even his accent. Like, he had an original South African accent, and now he's changed it into something other. So everything just screams psychopath. And going through Tesla's accounts, the actual numbers, things just don't add up. It's like, how can you run this empire that is valued more than the rest of the auto industry
Combined.
and you run it on a bare bones annual investment of $1 or $2 billion. Like the other companies, they spend $10 billion a year on improving their technology and their production facilities, and he's actually cutting. He's actually investing less and less every year, claiming to be super efficient. His cars are admired and revered by his fans, but the statistics shows that they are 10 to 20 times as more prone to accidents and lemons. There are a lot of faults with the cars. There are these alignments of different parts of the car. It's only about 1 or 2 or 3% of the cars, of course. The rest are super cool and they look good, and they go well, they're really fast at least, even if they seem not to be that durable. But for all practical comparisons with other car companies, they're extremely unreliable and faulty cars. And he still manages to sell as many as he produces. And he just keeps adding factories. And he has these weird ties with China. Not just weird ties with China, he's even had a sales room in this region where they were torturing Uyghurs. Why would you have a showroom there, of all places? And he just keeps sucking up to the Chinese government. But anyway, in the end, as we are now, the company has grown extremely fast. It's still at a 50% annual clip. Official numbers are 25% gross margins on the cars. A typical car company has 10% if you're really, really good. But on the other hand, there is no insurance. There is no accounting for faulty cars. But instead, he does these goodwill repairs. Far beyond the gross margins. You're supposed to actually take these into account in the beginning, but he just puts them somewhere else in the accounts, in the P&L. There are a lot of fishy stuff going on, and there are no quality owners in the company either. Every quality owner who has ever bought into Tesla stock, they leave within an hour, within a year. They visit the annual general meeting or some quarterly statements, and they try to talk to Elon Musk, and then they realize that no, fuck this, I cannot be in this company. There's something weird here, and he has had no lead. What's it called? You have this legal counsel. You're supposed to have a lead legal counsel on your company that takes care of whatever might go wrong in the company legally. And he's replaced like 5 of those in 5 years. Nobody stays on because they know that like this could backfire on me personally. On the other hand, it's still like a $600 billion company. It's a weird thing.
So in your eyes, there's just too much smoke for there not to be fire somewhere.
Yeah, but that is not the reason I'm short. Because shorting frauds is the most dangerous and difficult thing you can do, because they can always fraud you even more. Like Wirecard. It took 10 years for Wirecard to be exposed, even though people 10 years before said.
Such an incredible story.
This
Wirecard
is fraud. People showed the evidence, and then Wirecard like put muscle onto all the people who said anything, and for 10 years that went on, or Madoff took 20 years to expose after people said, look at the mathematics and the statistics. This is fraud. It cannot be done. Took 20 years to expose it. Enron, that also like 10x'd in 10 years before it was exposed, after everybody talked about it. And the same thing is going on with Tesla, but I'm only shorted because it's at 7 times sales. You cannot have a car company at 7 times sales. It's impossible. The other ones are at 0.3, 0.5, maybe 1 times sales, and they are at 7. And it's just a car company. People say it's not, but 85, 90% of the sales are cars.
Is there room for in your worldview, is there room for the argument that Elon Musk is in fact just exceptional, and him being a dick, him being a complete asshole, is an explicable factor for why he runs through marketing executives, legal executives? There are so many bad former employee stories that come from Tesla, him suing the shit out of the actual guy who founded Tesla. X, Y, and Z example are all explicable just from the perspective that he is such an exceptional operator and unusual, and has Asperger's, and is willing, and is kind of awkward and weird. You can see him in interviews, but at the same time, honest in what he's saying. I'm just this is not necessarily my view, but I just want to give the what do you call it, the counter.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to paint the picture that if he is exceptional, then all of the other things would follow as well. People who are underperforming or lazy, they would say exactly those things about him that they have said, like former employees. And if he is exceptional, then he would create 5 exceptional companies. And if he is exceptional, then Peter Thiel would say, do not bet against Elon Musk. On the other hand, if he just is a conman and a dick, then everybody would say exactly those things as well, including Peter Thiel would say, do not bet against him.
Yeah.
So both things, this is like a coincidence of opposites. You don't know which one it is. And maybe he has a good heart. Maybe he actually wants to do the things he says in his master plan. He wants to make sure humanity survives and become a multiplanetary species. And he's doing just everything he can, and he is exceptional and competent, and this is a way to do it. That might be true. And even if he started out good, and then it turned bad in the middle, and now he has a platform where he can raise more or less as much money he wants to. I mean, he's raised like $30 billion for Tesla, which is more than the entire profits over the course of the company's history. So it's actually the shareholders and the bondholders that have paid the profits. So there are no profits in Tesla in total. But having that platform and being able to raise that much money, now he can invent all the things that maybe he wants to invent. So maybe it's good and then was bad for a while and using and now he can be good again and use the money. Maybe Starlink is good, even though it's actually polluting the atmosphere. Maybe the Boring Company can be used on Mars for some reason, even though you're not supposed to make like a tunnel in Las Vegas. That's just show, and it's useless and it's actually dangerous. And so it's like there is always with Elon Musk this like completely bipolar reality. It's super bad or it's super good. And if you start out getting exposed to the good sides, you think that these are the perfect cars, and he created the EV revolution. Then you get sucked into that reality, and then that is true, and maybe it is true. But if you start out from the other side, you just have a super expensive company and an egomaniac as a company leader, and ruins people's lives and put private detectives on them. Then that is the reality. So I'm completely open to him actually wanting to do good, and it actually is doing good. But I just can't get my head around why does he act the way he does on Twitter and in. Like his interviews are super weird, and
Did you ever read Ashley Vance's biography of him?
Yes.
And what did you make of his portrait of him? Because I also listened to it, and I got I got a lot of appreciation for Elon Musk from listening to that. So I just wondered how you responded to it.
Well, the way I recall his biography was that I got the opposite view. I kind of thought that like he really is a fraud. He really just like makes things up as he go along. So my overarching perception after that was like I'm really onto something here. That
really,
yeah.
Okay.
That's weird.
Yeah, sure. And is it worth getting comments on what you think about his Twitter acquisition and so forth?
Oh yeah. Well, his Twitter acquisition has made me a ton of money. For example,
why is that?
Actually, 1 year ago, I was supposed to like give an early on view of my research universe to one of the founders or the founders of Antiloop hedge fund. So I went through the social space, Facebook and Google and whatever Snap, and I singled out Twitter as the one that is undervalued, underappreciated, that has the most potential. They are too cheap compared to their user base, and their user base is super low. They were like 200 million users, whereas Facebook has 3 billion users. So they were valued at less per user than Facebook. So it's just like it was a question of they are not really using their potential. And on top of that, every person who uses Twitter says that this is the one thing they will not give up. Whereas Facebook is like, if it crashes tomorrow, I won't even bother to go back there. It was something.
That's a damning result.
Yeah. So I said, like, if this valuation situation persists, then it will be taken over. It will be acquired, and we will make money from that. And then Elon Musk comes along and buys it. Unfortunately, I wasn't long when he made the offer, so I missed that initial one. But instead, I shorted it because I thought that there will be problems with this acquisition. Maybe he can't fund it, or they will say no, or there will be some troubles here. So instead, I shorted it on his acquisition, and then it fell through because he said, "Oh, I don't want to buy it anymore." Typical Elon. And you never know. I still don't know whether he wanted to buy it or not. And anyway, so it dropped a lot, and then when it had dropped, I was like, no, there are legal reasons here. He's actually forced to buy it. And the more I looked into it, and I got legal opinions from like U.S. attorneys that said like, no, like look through it. This is the actual legislation here, and he has already waived his rights to due diligence, so he has to buy it. He will be forced to buy it, whether he wants it or not. And it's not like it's not even that he just had to pay some kind of a fee or a penalty fee or something. No, he will have to go through. So then I went long, and then that legal opinion surfaced in due time, and the share price went up again.
Nice.
I think there were more twists and turns, and I actually made money on each twist and turn. So I was just like, I used to say when I worked at Antiloop, and at Futuris, I used to say that I'd rather be one step behind than trying to be one step ahead, because trying to be one step ahead, that's almost an impossible feat. But you will achieve the same result by being one step behind. So I'm like that slow guy that is a step behind, but therefore makes the right choices.
But by being a step behind, you're still several steps in front of the noise and then a lot of the energy that's going to actually move the market.
Yeah, well, maybe. I mean, I read a lot, and I'm there. I'm in the market. I'm not like a retail guy who actually doesn't know anything. So yeah.
That was a really interesting anecdote about your experience trading Tesla in several different ways.
Oh yeah, and I've also been short Tesla due to the Twitter acquisition, because I knew that he would have to sell the shares to finance it. So that was the additional piece of the puzzle that I needed to actually short Tesla more earnestly. And we talked about risk management before, and there has been a sentiment at work that Mike is not allowed to short Tesla because he has a personal vendetta against Elon Musk.
Which is fair enough.
Yeah, well,
whether it's true or not, but it's fair enough for that to be a reason.
Definitely, and I adhere to that view. So I said, sure, I will not short Tesla. And then I thought more about it, and I was like, no, my mandate says I must short the best shorts there are. And this is the best short there is. It's super expensive, and there are a lot of fishy stuff going on as well. And he is a forced seller because he has this Twitter situation.
Yeah.
So if I'm not short Tesla, I am not doing my fiduciary duty. I have to be. So even in the face of my colleagues saying, you cannot do this. It's your personal vendetta. You cannot do this. And I was like, no, I must. Otherwise, I'm not doing my work. No, I'm not doing my job. And so I'm risk management wise, that means that I have only shorted Tesla when I've felt completely sure about the case and the timing. In other stocks, I would give less weight to the timing and the exact share price. But here, I've been extremely careful about the share price and where I short. I wait until I get here is the perfect time.
Nice, yeah.
And I actually should use that in my other positions.
Is there a great Swedish short that you see at the moment? Is Northvolt a publicly traded company?
No.
No. But maybe that is an example if it were. But are there businesses you cast your eye on and you think this is?
I have not shorted any Swedish name ever. I was almost about to say, but actually, I was short fingerprints back in the days in 2015 and 16. It wasn't I was short, yeah, and it turned out very, very well.
Nice,
but that's the only Swedish name I've ever shorted.
No. A really, really interesting part from the Retarded Hedge Fund Manager was your exposure to these handful of Korean and Chinese shipyards. And I'd like for you to explain that, but then also explain how investing and your job invites you into super curious corners of the world that you would otherwise have no business poking around in, like Korean shipyards, for instance.
Yes, so Korean shipyards, just have to emphasize that it wasn't my trade. So we were three people at the firm, me, Matthias, and Arne. Arne, who was an old oil and shipping analyst from Norway. That's what they do there. And he was the CEO of the most profitable broker company in Northern Europe for 5 years, and he used that money to start Futuris, the hedge fund really created me and my worldview and my way of investing. So I owe everything to Arne. Anyway, he was looking for various ways to get exposure to the shipping industry. So was looking at like Finnish companies and Norwegian companies. And when doing this, we were talking to this kind of newly founded analyst research and broker company called Fearnleys. And they said, well, if you're really interested, you should look into Korean shipyards. And we were like, well, our statutes say that we are a European hedge fund with a focus on Scandinavia. And then we were like, we read our statutes like the devil would read the Bible, and it was like, well, we could have like 20-25% somewhere, or at least 5%. 5% is not a problem at all. That would still be, we would still be European with a Scandinavian focus. So we looked into these Korean shipyards, and the situation was that they were valued at like two times earnings. If earnings were to turn out the way we thought they might do in a couple of years' time, we had to have an assumption of where steel prices would be and where ship prices would be. We had a very good idea of the trajectory of ship prices, but we couldn't be sure about steel prices. But as long as steel prices didn't like triple, they would still automatically make a lot of profits in just like 2 years' time. In hindsight, maybe we were a little bit naive about steel prices. Like what we've seen now after the Ukrainian crisis, in whatever we've seen with gas prices, for example, natural gas prices, it's like, all right, we could have been seriously fucked back then if steel prices would have done something similar. I don't know if Arne had more, if he knew more about the steel price dynamics, like that they cannot 10x. They can only like do 2x or 3x, and even 2x is improbable. Maybe he knew that. I don't know if he knew that or not. The way,
or if that's true.
Yeah, no, exactly. So the way I saw it back then, it was just like, we know the shipping prices, we know the volumes, we know there is a shortage of all of these things. Probably steel prices has some kind of similar dynamics, but as long as steel prices don't go completely crazy, then the profits will manifest themselves, and they are actually trading at like 2 times earnings. And on top of that, they also have a lot of land that is not accounted for in like Korean accounts. So they have that too, that they can sell, and it's just for free. So we invested like 1% of the fund each in 5 different shipyards. I think it was 4 Korean and 1 Chinese, and they on average 5x'd. So at the point we had 25% of the fund in Korean and Chinese shipyards, and we are like a European long-short traditional equity fund.
But what about how your job and investing more generally invites you into curious corners of the world and encourages your curiosity and makes you learn about things that you would otherwise never know anything about?
I think what actually goes on is that finance is inherently like mind-numbing and boring. So if you have a healthy mind, then you're compelled to look for stuff. You have to make it interesting.
Right.
And that gets you to Korean shipyards, because you just cannot look at Nordic retail banks all day long. They will kill you. And that's what my life is all about. I mean, I want to get new perspectives and new insights. That's why I read. And I read non-fiction and I read science fiction. And I read them in the exactly same manner. I want to be wowed. I want to feel my jaw drop and I lose my breath. I just want to feel something new. There is something I didn't know. There's something completely surprising. And I do that in my work as well. And I think all the good investors, I think they do something similar. I think Druckenmiller and Soros, and I mean, I think they just want to know. They want to know something more. It's not about making money or being better than somebody else or just outsmarting somebody. We all want to know new things, see new perspectives.
And does having status, money, does this give you access to information that even, say, an investigative journalist trying to get to the same information wouldn't get?
I'm hesitating to answer this question because on the one hand, I would like to say that I do not have access to any information at all, and that is kind of a damning statement because that means that my investors would feel like, so why am I investing in you? I mean, you're not smarter than anybody else. You can't do anything more, so you need to have more information. And I'm like, but that information would be illegal in any case, so I don't have it. On the other hand, I guess I do have access to information. It's intangible. I couldn't put my finger on what information I have or what information channels I have, but I probably have like a feeling for stuff. I do get, I get whatever hints there are to get, but it's not that this is the way it is. I don't even meet with management anymore. I realized 20 years ago that they are hired marketeers. They are charismatic. They are good at portraying whatever they want to portray, and they are super duper good at duping me.
Okay.
Because I'm just like an average Joe. And then I realized, do not talk to management. Just look at the numbers. Everything you want to know is there. And I sincerely think that anybody could just pick up the quarterly earnings reports and press releases and do exactly what I do. So no, I actually don't. I know I don't have access to it.
One of the big angles to the story at the moment with the FTX collapse and Sam Bankman-Fried is everyone sort of complaining about how none of the investors did any due diligence. Do you think, maybe not with that as a specific example, but do you think there is a general trend is also the wrong word, but a general practice to do less due diligence or to do less, the numbers are actually the only thing that matters?
Well, there's definitely an element of people just buying whatever the narrative tells them to buy. So that's why people are long Shopify and GameStop. Two different stories, but still both are just like, well, everybody else likes this. The question is, did SBF do any due diligence on himself? I mean, he's supposed to be in the know about this whole story, right? And still he lost everything. So apparently he didn't understand. He didn't know. He was like fooled by himself. And all the story about all these prominent investors that are in FTX, they have like a minute part of their investments in him. Even the largest one had less than 1% of their assets in SBF or in FTX.
In FTX, yeah. But even 1% requires a level of due diligence.
You would think, but does it really?
Maybe
because,
not.
Because if you lose 1%, or you could stand to gain 10% on like that, like 10x.
Right.
Then maybe it's worth it. You have to be fast and agile, and you have to be there.
Right. So maybe your chance to get in.
Yeah, and maybe being in FTX is your ticket to get into the next thing.
That's a really good angle that I don't actually hear. in these conversations. I mean, I listen to a lot of investing podcasts where they're talking about this sort of stuff. No one's actually proposed that as an explanation for why perhaps there may not have been as much due diligence. It's almost like it's a party, and you don't know what the dress code is, but fuck it, like I'm going. We'll find out when we get there almost, because it means I can then go to the next one. And it's really interesting.
Yeah, and I also think that we all know that even when we do due diligence, we fool ourselves and people fool us. We can never really know. And like Wirecard, the fraud was there. Everybody knew it, except maybe the German FSA. Yeah. But they were probably in on it anyway, so they probably knew. Actually knew. But anyway, if there is fraud, if there is like you really have like the intent, then you can get away with it, and no due diligence will discover it. Sure, you would think that like just look at the bank account, you will know if the money is there or not. But you know that the short sellers they told the German FSA for years, just check the bank accounts, and they wouldn't do it.
They wouldn't do it. I mean, that's absurd, isn't it? But that's also there's a danger of trying to use the Wirecard outlier or the Theranos outlier as a rule to measure all other frauds by. There could just be exceptional circumstances that are applicable to one case versus the general rule.
Yeah, sure. But it does tell a story that if you really want to do it, then you can. Theranos, I mean, come on. Even from the get-go, from the actual inception of the company, the advisors, the professors at was it Harvard, they said no, this is not viable. They knew, they said, and Elizabeth still just went on with it.
Yeah, but that's part of the narrative. It's the new wave. Maybe the old grey-head scientists don't think it can work, but hey, they don't understand new technology,
and that's also true.
And that's all part of the.
Yeah. That's a coincidence of opposites, because they're both true.
Right. Yes, it is a coincidence of opposites, and there is also a big part to the Theranos story that I found super interesting and compelling, was the idea that if she had eventually figured it out, everyone would be saying, "Well, the ends justify the means." Sure, like if someone had knocked on the door at any given time, they would have discovered this amazing fraud. But look, she ended up creating this incredible technology that helps all these people around the world. The ends justify the means. Could the same thing be said for Elon?
Yeah.
If he's this giant fraud and he's driving all of this innovation and knowledge towards green tech, bringing down the cost of space exploration, if it works, do the ends justify the means? I don't know.
Well, if fraud self-driving eventually works out, then he will have created something immensely valuable and beautiful. But currently, there is no theoretical fundamentals for it ever to work out. I think that over the last 10 years, 10 years ago, I might have thought that that should be able to actually create a full self-driving technology. But now I think that it actually isn't possible. You can do it if you do it by like brute force, putting like sensors on every road, every 10 meters. Then you can teach the car to like technically drive. And it's very interesting to think about every car talking to every other car. Because if every car talks to every other car, then there will be no congestions, no accidents. It will be like going on a train. But then why don't do trains?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a bit of 80-20 principle to that, though. With self-driving cars, I was listening to an investor yesterday who has been with Tesla from day one. You certainly know who it is. It's Chamath Palihapitiya. Yeah, so he was talking about it, and he said that with self-driving, it could be that the last 10% take, say, a decade. And it's not a decade, 100 years or something like that. And you just reinforcing that point makes sense. It could be the 80-20 principle applied to the adoption of a crazy new technology where 80%, which is maybe as far as we've already gone, only required 20% of maybe the effort or the long-term effort. But to get that final 20%, and self-driving is only viable once it's like 99.9% secure, would actually require the biggest, hardest lift, whether it was putting sensors on the road or all other cars talking to each other, or just this unforeseen to the both of us, an exceptional piece of technology which you can install into a car.
I have several tangents to go off on here. One is Nikola, the trucking company that makes a hydrogen truck.
Were they another fraud?
No.
There was another EV fraud.
No, it seemed like a fraud. They on their demonstration they pushed a truck downhill and said it was going by their technology
Seamlessly.
So it worked. Very nice. But actually now they are delivering trucks. The company is there, and they have delivered EV trucks before Tesla, even though Tesla said that we are shipping our Pepsi trucks, that was 3 years ago or something like that, and there's still no Pepsi trucks, but I think they're supposed to deliver them tomorrow or something like that. 3 months, maybe, 6 months, definitely. Anyway, so Nikola, the company Nikola, had this idea. Trucks, they tend to go the same stretch of way, back and forth. It's the same 200 miles. They just go from that city to that city. It's almost like a train, but it's a truck, and it needs to be a truck. It can't be a train. And that means that you could position hydrogen stations along that route only. That means you don't have to create a network of EV charging stations for EVs over the entire world or continent, because that's what you need if you are a private person driving, because you will not buy an EV unless you know.
Hey guys, sorry about that. My audio all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, carked it. And by the time we got back to it, which was a 10-15 minute interlude, we totally forgot what we were talking about. So here, I will just pick it back up from when we started recording again.
No. I completely lost that train of thought.
It's dead. No worries. Yeah. Then rather than the Nikola tangent, was there something to be made of the 80-20 comment?
Well, I've actually made several podcast episodes about the 80-20 rule. There is tremendous wisdom in the 80-20 rule. You should never try to perfect stuff. Just do whatever works and do just a little bit of it. Do enough of it, and then stop short of just going completely nuts about the last 20%. And I think Elon Musk is a genius in as far as he gives zero fucks about the details
and perfectionism.
Yeah, he just wants let's get going, and then we have this step ladder principle. We'll get to here. And then from there, we'll get to the next part. We have no idea where that is. And we don't really know if we are a fraud or not. Because we take the next ladder, next step of the ladder. Sure, we have this super high lofty goal all the way there. We are going to be an interplanetary species, or multiplanetary species. Why? Really, why? I mean, it's so far off. Moving atoms through space to other planets, it's ridiculous given our current technology. It's you're stupid. It will never happen in your lifetime. It will not happen in your son's lifetime. It's so far off. Maybe even super developed aliens would not hurl stuff through space because it's too far. Go inwards instead. Like to tack on to what we talked about earlier, like take psychedelics and go inwards. Like maybe we could upload into the spin of elementary particles, and that's where we are. There is much more space there than like trying to hurl atoms through space. But he still does it, and that's the ultimate ladder. He has no idea how to get to the next point. Like he's talking about getting 1 million people to Mars. Why would you ever want to go to Mars? There's radiation.
I agree. I don't understand the romantic idea about going to Mars, because there isn't necessarily the same sort of adventure and exploration call to action that, say, the great explorers of the 1700s might have had to go to Africa or something. You know where you're going. You're going to desolation. Like, what are you going to find there? Maybe.
And I don't get why people get excited about that. I mean, he actually gets people excited about going to Mars. And
totally. I also don't understand that, but so be it.
So that's kind of 80-20, but in reverse.
Yeah. There's a couple more that I'd like to ask. These are more, I think, fast, easy for you to answer. But before I do that, there's Pippa Malmgren, who's someone who I know you admire very much.
Yes.
She wrote this incredible book called Signals.
Yes, amazing book.
And I'm getting a sense as well from your writing, but also speaking to you, that the idea of looking for signals, even though they might not be attached necessarily to numbers, but it's like gut feel, signal, okay, thesis, conclusion. Talk about signals, and also at the moment, what are big signals you're seeing that might drive towards a thesis you've made?
So I'm so happy to have interviewed Pippa Malmgren, and she's a delight to talk to. I mean, she just gives of her views and her time and intelligence. It's like, well, you talk to her, so
No, I haven't.
No, I haven't. Oh, no, okay. Anyway. And when I read Signals, it completely validated my own personal view of the world. Like, you are allowed to actually read into these anecdotes and stuff that actually happens in your world. Because otherwise, people always tell you, no. You have to have like 30 observations. Otherwise, it's not statistically useful. And you cannot use a single example as like a proof of anything. And at the same time, we know from, and I'm not sure if it was the First or the Second World War, when there landed like just one V2 rocket from Germany in Britain, and just from the serial number, they calculated a probable amount of total number of V2 rockets that the Germans had.
Yeah.
And that ties into the Lindy effect, which says that if you are waiting for the bus, if you have waited for 10 minutes, that does not mean that the probability of it turning up anytime soon is increasing. Rather, after waiting 10 minutes, it's like 50-50 that it will take 10 more minutes. After waiting for a full day, probably the probability that it will never appear increases, rather than, well, the bus will eventually appear. So that's like the Lindy effect and the V2 rocket effect and the Signals. And talking to her and reading Signals, it's completely validated my view that no, it's okay for me to take these minute signals in the world and turn them into at least hypothesis. And then I use that hypothesis with other signals to see if they are correct, which is exactly how we start out as children. We don't even know from the get-go if we are separate from the world or not. We don't know if our thoughts control the environment or not. We try it out, and sooner or later we realize that no, there are other people here, other consciousnesses. They have their agency. They do stuff. Slight tangent. Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. It's written by the same guy who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, yeah.
And Dirk Gently's holistic detective agency, there's this detective, and he has the idea that since everything affects everything, when you're trying to solve a case, you can look anywhere. So if he gets like a murder case, he can go on a vacation to the Maldives, and it's like, well, everything is affecting everything anyway, so I can just as well be here. So it's an extreme case of signals, there's also a parallel here to my idea of could just as well be one step behind as one step ahead. Since I think that everything is like 50-50 in a way, unless you have really, really good information. Then you start out as a good Bayesian that it is 50-50. And then you get an anecdote and it tells you that maybe it's 60-40. So go with that. And if it turns out to be wrong, then you just cut your losses. But you have to be disciplined about it. You have to take every new signal as strongly as the last one. You cannot be biased in the strength of the signals. So there is noise and there is signals, but you can't allow yourself to turn the signals into noise by weighting them differently. So therefore, I appreciate that I don't really know that much. The only thing I know are the things that come into my perception. So I take them seriously, but only until I get the next signal. And this works in the market. It works very well in the market. Not least because everybody else works this way. And that's what creates momentum and trends. And momentum and trends are almost the only factor that works like consistently. The only other factor that works consistently is valuation, actual fundamental accounting-based valuation. But that works over so long time periods. You have to wait like 10 years to be sure. At least like 4 years on average to actually make fundamentals work for you. And in between, you have to go with momentum. So it's momentum and then it's valuation. And all the other factors, they are just noise.
What about an example for when signals drove your behavior?
No, I don't have an answer to that. I really don't. Maybe. Well, let's get back to psychedelics.
Okay.
I was reading these books, and I had no idea what I was reading or where this would take me. I had no concept of me having any troubles, anything to solve. So I was reading Fridman's Psychedelic Explorer. I was reading Stanislav Grof. I was reading a lot of essays. And I thought that these have nothing to do with me, really. But somewhere in there, this wasn't just like interesting stuff to read. I thought in retrospect, I actually think that my subconscious said, listen carefully now, because I'm trying to tell you, you need to go this route. So I think that my being open to reading these books, my being open to the message in them, was a signal from my subconscious that said, you have a serious issue. You need to take care of this or you will not survive. Maybe an extreme case of signal, but
I don't know if Pippa covered signals from the subconscious in the book. But
no, but you know what she does? She says she works 80%. When people says, but you don't do anything, and she says, well, I spend 20% of my working hours just laying on my back in my bed thinking. That creates space for the mind to wander, for really thinking. If anything, I mean, forget about the question about signals. I think if there's anything important to say to people is to don't just do stuff. Just lay there. Some people say like, don't just stand there, do something. But you're supposed to do the exact opposite. Just lay still 20% of the time. Do nothing. Allow yourself to think, to really let your mind wander. People, it hurts and they feel uncomfortable and bored. But boredom creates creativity. There's actually a TED Talk about this. Really inspiring TED Talk. One of the most listened to of all was like this woman who got a child, and when she was out walking with the child in the stroller, she was so bored, and then creativity just exploded because the bored mind wants to create stuff. So if you dare to just lie silently, no music, no nothing, no people, 5 minutes. Actually, one of my most creative moments was 5 minutes of silence when I was thinking about. I just made a word cloud in my mind about perspective, insights, like relations, and if there's any advice I would want to give to anybody, is just be silent. Be silent for 5 minutes, or if you can fathom it, like just for an hour. Amazing stuff will happen.
And now, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there's so many echoes of Taleb in a lot of what you say. So I really think you would get a kick out of trying Fooled by Randomness again, at least Fooled by Randomness. But he has this whole idea of him being a flaneur, right? Where his days are unstructured. He wakes up when his body tells him to wake up. He goes for walks. He reads if he feels like reading, and then he writes if he feels like writing. And between all that space, anyone looking in from the outside would see him as a bit of a bum. Doesn't do much.
Yeah.
Now, he's got the freedom of financial security because he made a lot of money for Citibank. But it's cool for me to see, people I admire, Pippa, yourself, Nassim, come to these same conclusions about things that I instinctually also sort of latch onto and enjoy.
It's so nice to be validated by somebody you admire when they articulate something that you have thought about, but you never really put the words on it, but you just instinctively feel like, but this is what I've been saying all along. It's like when I was thinking about this, how long is a piece of string? And then along comes Ian McGilchrist and says, coincidence of opposites. And I was like, this is what I've been waiting for. Right. Finally, I was right. The universe is right. And now I know that somebody has put serious effort into this, and now I can pursue it even more. Maybe not in a scientific way, but in a intuitive way, which, by the way, is what science is about. And your own personal intuition is something to really rely on. In a way, it's the only thing you can rely on.
Do you want to talk about your worldview when it comes to the origins of consciousness?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, because I thought that was very interesting, and you were about to explain it off air, but I said, wait, well, let's do it on the podcast. So
yeah, I actually thought in a way that that was the reason you contacted me.
Okay.
It felt that way, like you had read my stuff for several years, listened to my podcasts, but it was just like the last few months that things clicked into place and you contacted me. I thought that because that I accelerated my postings about my worldview in the last couple of months. So
I think it's just a very convenient coincidence. And in fact, you want to talk about signals and, extremely unpredictable sort of random drunk walk of life. I happen to be in a gym. I happen to be talking to this guy who happens to be a big fan of yours, and he's subscribed to your newsletter for years. And he's the first person in Sweden that I'd spoken to who had similar intellectual interests to me, and as well happened to know you. It's just like, okay, cool, you know, there's something here. And he said, you know, why haven't you interviewed him yet? And it's like, yeah, why haven't I interviewed him yet? And anyway, that's kind of like how it came about. But it is this interesting coincidence, which maps onto you posting more, maybe you revealing more about your worldview meant this guy had more of a signal to attach me to you. Anyway.
Yeah, and I love that. Anyway, so I'm originally a super materialistic guy. I've been a hedge fund manager for over 20 years. I'm like financially successful, and I used to have this idea that the core theory of reality, that we have this standard model of the forces and the elementary particles. That is it. Quantum mechanics makes it interesting, but it's still, in a way, deterministic. Things are the way they are. And there is no free will. I listen to a lot of scientists. Everybody says, if you're scientific enough, there is no free will. The elementary particles will not budge to your will. Whatever they orbit, they will keep orbiting. Your mind is an epiphenomenon. You just feel something. There is no really good reason why you feel it, or why it would be there, because the elementary particles will still do what they will do, because there are laws and they are immutable. So suddenly I stumbled upon this idea that we actually have free will. That is what we have. That is the origin of it all. The consciousness we have, why would that appear in the between of particles? Like if you imagine particles being like billiard balls orbiting each other. It's not the correct view, but let's say that's what it is. But it's more complicated, it's fields. But anyway, so they orbit each other. Why would there be anything in between? If there is anything in between, then that between is forces or fields or something that was there all along. So that's actually where quantum field dynamics is going. So they realized, no, it's not particles. Everything is just fields. And particles, they are a useful way of looking upon the fields. So when you observe a particular part of the field, if you ask a certain question, you get a certain answer, and that answer is the particle there. But it's really all just fields. Anyway, in all of this, there is no consciousness. Where would this otherness come from? This is that is not particles or fields, that is not materialistic. Where would it come from? So this is the original dualistic conundrum, the Descartes dualistic conundrum. What science did was said, like, let's disregard this whole consciousness thing and just think about the material world and how we can manipulate it and forecast it. So that's what we've been doing since the Renaissance, more or less. But it still just leaves this consciousness stuff. And the only thing that you and I can be completely sure of is that we are conscious.
Are?
Yeah, well, I am conscious. I'm not sure about you. I have no idea, really. Actually, I do. But anyway, I am sure about my consciousness. It is something to be me. That's really the only thing I know. I don't even know that this table here exists. I know that it has a resistance, but on the other hand, so do walls and stuff in computer games. It feels like you're bouncing against stuff, and they make sounds, and you can't go through them. But you still know when you look at a computer game, there's nothing there. It's a line on a screen. It's just a useful icon that tells you the rules of interaction, but it is not there. There is nothing there. It's just a rule. So this table here is a rule. But I am conscious. I know that I am. I'm not really sure what being is, but at least I know I am. But I'm not sure about this table. All I know is it's a placeholder, or it's a rule. It's something that you and I agree on, that there is a table here. So that formed the basis of the next step, which was that. So why start at particles and physicality if I don't know what that is? But I know consciousness. So why wouldn't consciousness be the start of it all? There was one consciousness. It just, nobody knows how it appeared, but it did. It's no less strange than the Big Bang. I mean, the Big Bang that's the limit of incredulity. Like, hello, people say like
the atoms had to come from somewhere.
Like religion. No, that's weird. There's a God. Like you can't talk about that. You're just weird. But we think that billions and trillions of galaxies and stars exploded into being from nothingness. That's our idea. Are you stupid?
I'm more comfortable just saying I have absolutely no idea, rather than trying to defend the Big Bang or defend Darwinist evolution.
But we know, more or less know, that the Big Bang did happen, or at least it happened from like a uniform ball of plasma. One thing to consider there, by the way, is that why wasn't it a black hole? Like if you had all the matter in one place, that's exactly how black holes, that defines black holes. You cannot have too much matter at one place without it being a black hole. So why wasn't it a black hole? Because it was perfectly uniform and big enough before the actual explosion, before the inflation. But it's still a weird situation. It's a situation that doesn't really rhyme with the laws that we base everything else on. So what we're saying is that the initial conditions, they do not conform with the laws that we later apply. There is something weird with the start. And the start itself is also very weird. Like, where did it all come from? How could matter and energy and 3D space just randomly fluctuate into existence? Well, from what? There had to be something there. There had to be fluctuations or randomness. So where did that come from? So anyway, physicality, 3D space, and Big Bang, and all of that, it's just weird and made up. So why not make up something else? Let's say it's all started with consciousness, and this first consciousness, it said to itself, oh, well, this is slightly boring. Maybe if I split into two, just to get to know myself. So it's kind of split into two in a way. But
what is the consciousness?
It's just an awareness of being. So something either there never was anything, or there were.
Or there was something.
Yeah. So there is something, and this something, it was something to be that something. That is what consciousness is: to be aware of being. Of being, or aware of anything. I mean, an elementary particle might be aware of gravity. That is like a proto-awareness.
So I know this takes it a little bit away from what you're describing, but would you ascribe consciousness to then, like a fish?
Yes, definitely. But
a krill.
We can jump ahead here.
Yeah. No,
we don't have to go through the like atoms of everything.
No, but I would like to understand more
yeah.
that first step, because
we'll get back to that. Okay. But anyway, if there is like consciousness, what I'm proposing is that this consciousness, it's dimensionless. It has nothing to do with 3D space or energy or mass or anything. It just is. It just appeared somehow, which is still just weird. How can anything appear if you really go back to it? Like, what the fuck? What's all this doing here? No matter if you believe in the Big Bang or consciousness or whatever, it had to start somewhere, or did it? Our concept of time and starting and causality, it's probably all wrong. Anyway, this is my current worldview. We are consciousnesses. We created 3D space and matter to amuse ourselves. We wanted to know what it is to be conscious. So this original consciousness split into a multitude, and it wanted to interact with itself to see whatever that is, because there is an infinite possibility of resonance. So we created 3D space and matter, and what's really going on now, you as a physical being, you have a very complex machinery in your skull, the brain. Like we said before, 100 trillion synapses. What consciousness is like a flow, a stream that streams over your brain. Your brain is like a rock in a stream, creating eddies and twirls and like whirls and vortices. But it's still just a physical object. It's a more or less dead physical object. So consciousness uses this complex rock to twirl around. And that makes it interesting for the consciousness. But the twirls are real. The twirls are who you are here on this world.
So consciousness didn't latch onto me.
No, consciousness just twirls around the rock that is your brain. So the consciousness in itself, it's something else. But when it encounters your brain, it twirls and creates these interesting vortices. And that's who I am talking to, the vortices. But it's not actually the consciousness that is the origin of you. It's just a part of you. It's the manifestation in this physical reality.
What about where the consciousness sits? So it sounds like it is in the brain, according to that explanation. Because I'm sure you've done the meditations where it's like, okay, now where are you?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm in my fingertip. I'm not necessarily behind my eyes.
No, you can be there because this flow, it flows through the entire physicality of it all. You are a nexus, and the brain is the most complex nexus of it all. But there's something to be in your finger as well, and your consciousness, the original one, the one that is you, it flows through the finger as well, and you can direct your awareness to the flow through your finger as well. It's not as strong and it's not as complex. It's not really you, but it's actually not you in the brain either. That is such a minute part of you. It's a very, very small part. And when you die, and your actual consciousness becomes aware of what you have done for this blink of an eye of living a life here for like 90 years, then it will be like you just dipped your fingertip in a little bit of cold water, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm a little cold here. That's what your life is. You were experiencing like 90 years on Earth as a physical being, and then you will get back to...
But the consciousness lives on.
Yes.
In another person?
Yeah, no, consciousness cannot die. And that's the.
This is fundamental to your worldview.
Yes, that's
if it started off with consciousness.
Yeah, that's both the problem and the gift. This consciousness, somehow it just appeared, lonely,
But so, how do you go from consciousness, which is not material at all, to a material world?
Yeah, well, you just create rules. Yeah, like you program a computer game.
So this is more leaning towards it being a simulation versus
Yeah, but
this being physical, real material.
Yeah, but when you talk about simulations, it sounds like intelligent beings creating a simulation. This is consciousness actually creating reality, creating 3D space.
I think I'm slowly coming around to understand. But go on.
So so what I think is that consciousness just like we have to have an interesting playing field. We have to have resistance. We have to have persistence. We have to have something that is not so free flowing that our consciousness is. So let's create rules. And that's exactly what we people do when we create computer games. We do Minecraft and I don't know, Call of Duty, and in it there are boundaries, there are rules, and there are like walls and people and stuff, and we relate to them. But everything is just rules of interaction, and the table here, it's a rule of interaction.
And so when you take the psychedelics, you think you are going beyond the rules.
Certain psychedelics, yes. I wouldn't say that LSD actually qualifies.
We're talking about the ayahuascas of the world.
Yeah, exactly. So ayahuasca is a way of ingesting dimethyltryptamine, DMT. There are other aspects of taking ayahuasca than just the molecule DMT. So you can take DMT in several different ways. You can take it intravenously, you can smoke it, or you can drink this ayahuascan brew. When you drink the ayahuascan brew, the enzymes in the brew, they make you vomit. And this purging puts you in a certain state of mind that I think is, well, I haven't done ayahuasca, so but I think what it does, it puts you in a certain state of mind which makes you receptible to the DMT experience. When you smoke DMT, you just get instantly transported to a completely different space. And I've read. There is this guy, Andrew Gallimore. He's I think he's a brain scientist, but maybe also a computer scientist, and he's written this Creating Worldviews, where he shows how we probably way back here or on other planets used DMT as the neuromodulator to render the world. So there is something going on here. We don't really know what it is, the actual base of reality. There is something that is out there. This is what quantum physicists talk about when they say, like, either there's just the wave function, or there's actually hidden variables between. As Sean Carroll, he talks about like something deeply hidden. Wonderful book, by the way. So there's something underneath. But for us as physical people, okay, one more book, The Case Against Reality by Don Hoffman. Have you read it?
No.
It shows he has actually made simulations of what would happen if you have competing entities and a reality. How would they measure reality and each other, and how would they interrelate, and what would come out in the other end? And what comes out is these entities, they would have no idea at all of the actual reality. They will create fitness points and certain ways of relating to layers of reality.
And he's suggesting that's us.
Yeah, that's completely devoid from the actual reality. And that is us. And we also evolved more specifically from using DMT as the preferred neuromodulator to serotonin. Serotonin is the way we now render the world. But the interesting thing is that if you smoke DMT, it instantly replaces serotonin and creates a completely different worldview. You suddenly see something completely different. And it's instantaneous, it's clear, it's 100% effective, and you're completely there. And there is no time, there is no Euclidean space, there is no gravity, there is nothing that we now relate to as the world. So it changes everything. And when you get back, it's like you that was where you were at home. But when you get back here, it's like, what the fuck? I'm a meat bag? And this is like the world? What is this? And it takes a while. And there's this fun cartoon which shows like a jellyfish on Pluto smoking a bong, and he has this like thinking bubble about being a person on Earth, and his jellyfish friends on Pluto says, "Did you feel it?" That's how it is to get back from 90 seconds of smoking DMT. I've heard.
Does the consciousness from the beginning have any type of agency? Is it intentionally doing things, or is it just a consequence of randomness?
These are extremely difficult and foundational questions.
In your opinion?
Yeah,
without trying to justify it or anything?
No. My view is we have free will and agency. That is what we have. That is what consciousness
and therefore the original consciousness amoeba had agency
itself. Yeah, it wanted something.
This is a God figure then.
Yes, it is. Some Alan Watts calls it. I think what he refers to with the Godhead is this. I'm not really sure exactly what he means by the Godhead. I think he. There's like an echo here to the fountainhead, that something originates and it starts there, but I'm not sure. But yes, you could say God, the One, Chi, Tao, all of these things are just attempts at naming what cannot be named. And it's the origin. And we cannot understand the origin.
And then, therefore, what meaning does this give you? What meaning does this worldview give you? Is it even important to have meaning?
Well, both. On the one hand, no, you don't have to have meaning or purpose unless you do.
I think purpose is different to meaning.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Well, different strokes for different blokes. To me, a lot of these concepts are completely commingled. I don't know. But I went through life. My absolute best friend, he used to say, you're like perfection without purpose. You just keep working out, accumulating money, career, but you have no purpose. You just keep doing it. Why?
Good question.
And it just I just put one foot in front of the other because somebody told me to. Somebody had told me to. I thought somebody had told me to. So I just kept doing it until I suddenly realized, oh no, I actually have agency. I am. It's something to be me, and I can make choices, and those choices are real and important. And then suddenly, I had the potential of meaning, but I actually didn't have a meaning or a purpose. And then suddenly, this worldview comes along, and what happens is that I was never afraid of death. Never. I was completely non-religious, atheistic, like I will just die.
Just blood and bones.
Yeah, and then it's over with. This was all a random fluctuation in the universe. But the more I think about it, now I cannot see how you can either create consciousness or destroy it. So it has to be infinite, at least from our point of view, whatever infinite means. And the meaning I see is that the meaning here in physical life is to experience everything. Let's say you knew you were eternal and you got the choice, like, do you want to, like for just a blink of an eye, experience all the emotions of a physical person? It's just like it's like going on a roller coaster ride. Would you do it?
100%.
Yeah, of course. But for us, these 90 years, they can be excruciating. They're painful and it feels like a struggle and it's uphill and it's emotions everywhere. And we really more or less just want to be done with it. But given the perspective that you chose this, and it's just for the blink of an eye, then even the worst pain becomes almost enjoyable.
So it is a source of meaning for you.
Yes.
This realization.
Yes.
And this formulation of a worldview.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Well, what more is there to say on this topic? What do you think? I do have more questions to round out, but I want to make sure that we address this properly. I admit I still am not understanding the origins of it. Just conceptually how you think about it. Obviously, I'm not a physicist, so I don't understand the Big Bang either. But I at least understand as it's been explained. And I also, like I said before, I don't necessarily want to put any credence in the Big Bang. No. But I take a lot of comfort out of I don't know this to be true, but how I believe it to be, that we are just a random flutter, like you said. And therefore, there is, in the face of that realization, you can take the nihilistic road and just become an NPC, right? Or a Patrick Bateman, right? Or you can come to the same conclusion that you've come to, which is, we're here for a limited amount of time. I want to experience absolutely everything this world has to give me. And in the realization for me that we are potentially just a random flutter, it made me more keen to experience life because there is a scarcity to it. And in its finite nature, that's where the beauty comes from. Scarcity creates value. A piece of art on the wall could be objectively terrible, but it's one of a kind, and therefore, how do you ascribe the value to it? So, anyway.
Yeah, I find immense comfort in knowing that I changed my worldview, and I can change it again, given new information or new experiences. I'm completely open to that. I mean, I came to be like 47, 48 years before I changed. And then I found this completely new perspective. And I think it's a much better perspective, more true. But I'm definitely open to me just being a human, that a random fluctuation in chemicals here on Earth. What the fuck do I know? Probably nothing. So, and I can change again. I just hope to live long enough to actually change again. Maybe what I'm thinking now is kind of right. But even if I am right, then that right is so weird and strange that I cannot understand it. When I am like just drawn up from this place,
and if
it would be so strange, we're so different. So I will change my perspective, and that is why I'm here. That is what I like. I want new insights, new perspectives. I want to be jaw dropped.
And if we are simply the jillionth iteration of split consciousness, would the one ever expect you to even understand what it was? or for you to get any sort of grip on its worldview. I think that is a really powerful message in all the religions that gives a lot of people comfort, just putting faith in the idea that you cannot understand God's plan.
I mean, let's say you are the one, and your cells are the consciousnesses. There is no relation. There is no one-to-one relation. You, composed of cells, is so different from the cells that you cannot relate. Do the cells think that you have a plan? Do the cells in my fingertip, could they ever understand my plan for moving around, and suddenly I touch a glass and this is wet? Like, what the fuck? What do the cells understand about my plan? Was that a plan?
But it's all the same consciousness.
Well, the cells have their plans. Their plans are based on their neighbors and their internal chemicals, composure. But there is no way for a cell in my finger to understand my plan, my central nervous system plan here in the physical universe.
Right.
It's so different. And maybe the one, God, the totality of it all, maybe it has a plan or a proto-consciousness, or like it's trying to do something. Maybe what it wants to do is understand what consciousness is. That's why it's split. But we, as cells of this super consciousness, we're so far apart that there is no relationship at all.
Maybe interestingly, how do people typically, I mean, do you try to talk to your friends and family about this? Like, hey guys, I think I might have stumbled across, the answer here. And do they sit through it, and do they try to listen? And
well, I've started a little bit, but it's like when Patrick Bateman says, I've tried cooking a little.
okay.
It doesn't really land well.
No.
Kind of interesting looks, but they are happy that I have something to think about.
Yeah.
And something I believe in or exploring, but it's really not something people generally adhere to.
But it's such a challenging idea because
Yeah.
it does draw into question so many fundamental questions that people just take for granted.
It says that the entire scientific paradigm is wrong.
Yes, exactly. And that all these guys talking about religion are nonsense, and all these people talking about no religion are also nonsense. Does it give you sympathy for religious people?
Yes, definitely. I finally understand why people gather, why they chant, why they pray.
Faith.
Why they have faith. They have faith in something they have no idea about. They just say, have faith. And I definitely have a bone to pick with everybody who talks about a personal God, that there is like this person that takes an interest and that like creates stone tablets and whatever have you. I think, they are, but I'm not mad about mad anymore. I just see them as children. They are trying. I mean, we are here alone in the world, and they want to make sense of why are we here, and how did it all happen, and so why not believe in a personal God? Because there is something. It's not just atoms. Atoms is.
But you can't be sure about that.
No, but I can kind of be sure that after just 100 years of science in a 5 billion year old or 13, 14 billion year old universe, those 100 years have not
scratched the surface.
That has not found the answer. The answer is not billiard balls orbiting each other.
Okay. We just finished talking about, or you just finished talking about how you now have sympathy for religious people.
Oh, yes. So if there are a few advice I would like to give to people, it's in the context of religion, it's to just meet with people, socialize. That is the physical beings that we are. We are tribe members. We want to belong. We want to be in a context of other consciousnesses. It does tie into the idea of the original one splitting to know itself. But in a more biological context, it's just like we grew up on the savannah. We are tribes of about 150 people, and we want to fit into that tribe. We want to have people around, and that is what it's absolutely most wrong with modern society, is that we sit alone in our apartments and do not socialize. And what we do is like we exchange texts on social media. What we should do is we should use technology to maximize the time we can spend with other people, with other consciousnesses. Dogs are people too. So you can, but you should be with other consciousnesses. Be with, like, friends is the ultimate gift. You cannot buy a friend. You have to create a friend. You have to be a friend, or a good dog owner. But that is what is really going on here. So that's one thing. The other advice I had was like, do just one more, for example. Like, but that's a practical it's a tool, and the just one more tool. What it aims to create is a platform for you to be with other people, and that is what religion is. Like my friend Alexander Bard, he talks about relegare. That is where religion comes from. It means to be together, more or less.
And Alexander Bard is like classic Christian or Catholic, right?
Hard to exactly. He's a Zoroastrian.
Oh, is he? Okay. That's a nice. What's the word? Like it's an eclectic curiosity. Yeah.
It was before all the monotheistic religions, the Zoroastrians, and that's where it all originated.
Well, look, Mikael, we've been speaking for like 3 hours or something. I've got final questions here for you that I try to ask every single guest. The first I will tee up via a quote from the end of the book, which I was very happy to see, because I asked this question genuinely in all 150 interviews that I've done. And this quote was perfectly for it. So you said, "It took a lot of luck as well, but then again, serendipity is there for whoever gives it a chance." So talk about the role of serendipity in your life.
If you put in the work, if you're a good person, if you constantly strive to be ready, be strong, be healthy, be read up, if you're interested in reality, then that creates a platform for whenever things happen. Things happen all the time. If you're a stock investor, there are tens of thousands of stocks there. There's always one that will perform incredibly. But for you to encounter it, and for seeing it, identifying it, being sure that you can actually take advantage of it, then you have to have this readiness. So that is what serendipity is. Serendipity, it's everywhere. It's like serendipitons are like they're striking you all the time, but to actually feel them and use them, you have to be ready. You have to be this water tank, big enough to just make a bigger water tank to capture these serendipitons.
And do you have an example, a tangible example of where serendipity struck? Where you collided with serendipitons?
Well, there's so many variants of this. I mean, I actually think that in retrospect, my brother drowning was the biggest serendipiton of it all, of everything. That created who I am through hardship. But I got to the stars through that hardship. So that is the biggest serendipity of all. But then there are a lot of small ones, like I've happened to read this science fiction story, or this I happen to understand a few things about certain science areas, and that means that I at least thought that I understood a certain company. Like why when what are they called? Corn, whatever.
Like
anyway,
in the eye?
Yeah, no, it's kind of like that, but it's actually the one company that creates the special glass that is used in fiber optic fibers. In
I don't know.
Optic fibers. Anyway, I just happened to read up on how it works and how they use different spectrums, different wavelengths, different colors, and how they split it in time and in colors, and just the feeling that I understand and know meant that I could invest in this company. But in retrospect, I actually didn't understand. So the serendipitous of it all was that I was curious in a lot of ways, and I learned about stuff that had nothing to do with finance or my profession, but I did have the knowledge, and then it created the feeling that I know, and that this is recurring, because I constantly learn that I didn't know anything. So this is like the opposite of the hubris cycle. The hubris cycle, it's still there. It's very potent. But I have the opposite as well, where I constantly this reinforced that you know nothing.
Nice, amazing.
Jon Snow.
This is a question I've reframed for you specifically, because we've been speaking for a long time. Most people seek you out, I assume, because they want you to tell them how to play the markets, right?
Yes.
And although I am as well extremely interested in that sort of stuff, I think once you consume enough Taleb, or like I said, there's a lot of echoes in your writing as well, it kind of gets to the point where it's just read more and become a better risk manager is kind of like the bottom line. Anyway, but there's also lots of content where people can find you speaking about that specifically. Hence why there hasn't been much of that in this interview. But there's a question at the end that Lex Fridman asks all his guests in his interviews. And while I think it's a very basic question, nonetheless, I really look forward to hearing his different guests, how they answer it. And the question is simply, what advice would you give to young people?
I've heard this question a lot, and I've heard the answers a lot. I always think that it's an impossible question to answer, because on the one hand, I would want to say, like, follow your like inner voice, your consciousness. You are something. Like, just be silent for an hour a day and listen to who you are. But on the other hand, you cannot do that unless you have actual real world experience. You don't know here in the physical world who you are. And so the opposite answer is do what's expected of you, what's kind of the world and society tells you to do. Like at least just go through the motions that you're supposed to do long enough to not fuck up. So in the end, you will still have the optionality of choosing. So on the one hand, I would say, and I do say in my podcasts, do not go to school. Do not go to, at least not to college. It's a waste of time. They will pollute your mind. You will get old knowledge. It's better if you are ambitious to just look it up online. But you don't know what to look up online. You don't know what to do unless you actually do know what to do. So some say follow your passion. Others say do absolutely not follow your passion. both are right. Coincidence of opposites again. Follow your passion if it is your passion, but then you cannot choose. The ones that follow their passion, if it's a real passion, they can't choose. They are artists, or they paint, or they sing, or they do what, or they explore. They cannot choose because it's their passion. But if you don't have that passion, then you probably just need to get like the same kind of platform as everybody else by just doing what you're supposed to do. Go to school, answer the math questions, like take college classes, like make sure you get a degree. It's not that hard. It's just a few years. That's exactly how I thought. Like, get a few years, and then you make money, and then you can choose. It wasn't maybe that articulated, but I still think it's good advice for like 80-90% of the people. Just walk uphill. Just make a little effort. It's just like 3-4 years, and then you can choose. Then you can listen to weird podcasts.
And there's like maybe the hard thing, but just one more day, one more hour, one more task in the direction of wherever it might be you're trying to go. Also, I just noticed my note under the question. You said exactly the same thing, but in the end of the book, you write, anybody can be a mediocre finance slave making quite a lot of money. Very few, however, will be happy doing it. Find your particular leverage, your unique combination of skills that will set you apart through lateral living, i.e. exploring extremes without risking permanent damage. That's a very Talebian sentence there. Really, there is so much similarities between the two of you.
Yeah. We can all be miserable having pretty good careers. Let's try not to do that.
Nice.
There's too many people doing that anyway.
What is a country you're particularly bullish on?
Oh, in what does that mean?
It is actually left to your interpretation. However you define bullish. It doesn't necessarily have to be from a money in, money out perspective.
I would like to go to New Zealand. I think they are like the Switzerlands and Swedens of the world, but better. More interesting nature.
Okay.
They are more apart. They don't seem to be too tied up with world politics and geopolitics.
Definitely not.
It's very diverse geographical place. You can do a lot of stuff. You can ski and you can go swimming. I'm not sure why they are not more successful or profitable.
Because
you never hear about New Zealand
because they're tiny.
Yeah, and maybe also
so far away.
They maybe are happy. Hard to say. Maybe that's my instinctive idea about New Zealand probably is wrong, and I probably should look elsewhere. And if I'm trying to be, if I'm looking for a country to be bullish on, try to picture the entire globe. Where could you find the raw materials that push us into like an electrical future? Africa has always been the backwaters, but they have tremendous natural resources, and that's where we all came from. It should be like the cradle of everything.
Yeah.
Why are they not prosperous? Probably they will be sooner or later. But in the meantime, for the coming century, it's probably China or India. They have the people. At least China has the resolve. China has the technology. They have a certain type of philosophy or leadership, at least. If you want to know who's going to rule the world in the coming 100 years, it's probably China. India is a completely dark horse. You never know. But I mean, Sweden was in 1867 during the famine. We were completely ruled out. And then 100 years later, we were the richest country on earth in 1967. That's completely unpredictable.
Yeah, that is crazy, isn't it?
We had rotten potatoes in 1867.
There is... What do you make of Swedish exceptionalism? If you look at multiple... Now, your face is squirming, so I get a sense that it may not be something you want to acknowledge or talk about or anything.
I have an idea.
Okay, good. Then I don't even need to tee it up. Tell me.
Oh, so it's cold and harsh up here. We had to cooperate. We had to fight against the elements. That made us structured, hierarchical, reliable. If you live on the like the African plains, you have all the warmth and you can eat whatever passes your way. Of course, you can also get killed by whatever comes along. But in Sweden, you will die if you have not stored food for 6 months over winter. I think all the people living up north, Canadian, Swedish people, it creates something. Why Sweden was more successful than maybe Canada or Greenland or something like that, I don't know. But I think we were one of the ones having a really good shot at exceptionalism just because we lived in such a harsh environment.
Interesting. And how do you think the modern Swedish society holds on to those three tenets that you said, structural, hierarchical, and reliable?
I think we are at the complete opposite end of the spectrum now because of the welfare state, the cradle to the grave. You don't have to do anything. Actually, when I was in middle school, I was thinking explicitly, I will never have to work in my life. I will live on welfare. That is my plan. That was my plan because I knew I am in Sweden.
What a drastic change of approach to it. I mean, obviously you didn't go down that path, but surely that can't be the almost default thinking that most middle schoolers are having today.
I guess not. I have no idea what they think, but they probably are pretty pampered. They know that they are safe and secure, and they really don't have to do anything. But they probably also know that the state will not pay for everything, so they will have to do something. But it's impossible for me to put myself in the shoes of a middle schooler today. I have no idea. Okay. But whatever comfort I take from all of this is that I keep changing. I was something completely different as a 7-year-old compared to when I was 9, and when I was 12 compared to when I was 19, because I went from being a complete socialist communist to a libertarian, like the Atlas Shrugged libertarian.
That's so funny.
And then I went from materialist to whatever I am now, a complete airhead.
Nice. Yeah. What would Ayn Rand make of your worldview these days?
I don't think she would like it at all.
No.
No.
Well, I'm sorry to the good people of New Zealand for talking you out of it. You should definitely, obviously, still go. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just a random guy, but it's amazingly drop dead beautiful. And New Zealanders are probably, after Irish people, the funniest people in the world. They have a great sense of humor. I love New Zealand.
I've been to the city Gold Coast twice.
Okay.
So, it's time the time I went to it, some things that's really beautiful.
Yes, I think so, definitely. Final question.
Yes.
Mr. Syding, if you could witness a conversation between any two people of history, dead or alive, no language barrier, so listen to a podcast, who are you listening to?
I really would like to hear Ian McGilchrist speak to Terence McKenna. Ian McGilchrist, the brain scientist who formulated this left brain hemisphere divide, and Terence McKenna, psychonaut extraordinaire who has been like instrumental in portraying whatever goes on in the psychedelic sphere. And it still amazes me that Ian McGilchrist, that he never even touches the idea of psychedelics, because that should be front and center of whatever he's talking about. I mean, there is research showing how the brain shuts off completely on ketamine. That means that the rock that we talked about, that the consciousness interacts with, it's shut off. So it's only consciousness left. And this has not been done in people, but it's done in sheep. And it shows that the brain is turned off. I would love to hear Ian and Terence McKenna talk about this.
Amazing. Have you ever had a correspondence with Ian?
I've tried, but he's too occupied. He doesn't answer.
Oh, shame. Well, he's on my list for podcast guests. So maybe one day I can hook you up. Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah.
Well, Mikael, thank you so much. Real pleasure, and for being so generous with your time, but then as well generous with your answers.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers.